Hey, what's going on, everyone? Check out what's coming up this week on Legacies.
Because this battery was designed for 140 recharge cycles, guys.
Wow.
Guess how many times this thing's being recharged?
Be smart about this. Like you need to abide by those basics, right? That's the reason we keep our account fairly clean.
Yeah.
To be able to bring this content to you guys.
I didn't want to play that game anymore, but if we're going to legalize it, like, they're not legalizing it without me. Fuck no.
Hey, welcome to Legacies, everyone. I'm your host, Tom Ritchie, joined by Wesley the Wizard Bowles. Wes, why haven't you changed? Like, when I look at you, like, you still got room to put Wizard. I know that the audience doesn't see that necessarily. Is it in your lower third ever?
No, it's never. It's never in the lower third. But
yeah, well, you never fail to amaze me on all the different things that you can do. So you definitely need to put the Wizard in. I approve. How you doing this morning?
Looking outside, it's a little gloomy, and I'm okay today.
Are we going back to the weather? We're going back to the weather.
We're going back to the weather. I was up fairly early this morning. I did a drop off for an airport drop off, so a little tired this morning, but doing all right. Okay.
Well, let's first remind everyone that Legacies is powered by Breadstack retailers. It might be time for an upgrade. Have you seen the Farmer Jane site?
I did see some posts about that. Yeah, it looks really nice.
Gorgeous. I just love how there's a differentiator across all these sites now, rather than the plain old Dutchie menus.
Yeah, those Dutchie menus they're
all the same.
They're tired looking now. Yeah,
there's no differentiation between one retail and another retail. So, anyways, Farmer Jane, check it out. If you haven't seen it yet, you want to check it out and see what the Breadstack team does. Speaking of weather, I don't know if you've gotten any snow yet. I have twice. I've already had the snowblower out.
No way, really?
I'm not even joking. Yeah, I mean, I've got quite a bit to move, and it's got to move a distance. You've been here, and yeah, I haven't had a chance to service it though. I made the mistake when Ash and I were getting it out. I said, "Oh, I didn't winterize it." And he's like, "What?" I go, "Yeah, I didn't winterize it." I go, "I mean, summerize. I didn't summer store it properly. I think I forgot to add the gas additive, but." Anyways, I'm sure I'll be blowing snow again at some point, maybe later this evening with all the stuff we've got going on.
Wow. Yeah, no, I'm lucky here. We haven't had much here in Burlington yet. I had a slight dusting, if you call it that, this morning, but yeah, nothing crazy yet.
Yeah, we've gotten probably 5 or 6 inches so far, and more on the way. Whatever.
You're already over it.
Yeah, I like winter. I hate cold, but I'm learning in this new positive mindset of mine to somehow adapt to it. It looks like it'll be a snowboard year potentially. I'll maybe join my son on the slopes. Yeah. Nice. Do we have coverage if I were to break something?
Coverage for you to break something? Yeah, I don't think so.
We don't have those benefits. No, we don't have any benefits. There's a lot of benefits, but it's not that benefit.
Free cannabis can only be so much of a benefit. Yeah.
It helps. It certainly helps. Did you see? Was it Katherine Witt had posted? Oh man, this stuff drives me insane. So Katherine Witt posted OCS slightly offside, maybe about the benefits of cannabis. I think OCS had posted this on their Instagram. Did you see that?
Yeah. The that like you said, that post I don't know.
Well, where it got even better was when she posted, what was it, the AGLC. Did I get that acronym right? AGLC had posted another one. Right? It's like, are they speaking with each other, going, "Hey, let's break some rules and prove to everyone that we can do things and you can't." The OCS one was one thing, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I understand. There's some factual evidence there potentially, and then we saw Harrison Jordan had followed up with, this is what they could do to argue against this, and this is why they could justify it, etc. But on the AGLC one, it was a 8-bit pixel. It looked like a video game of little Johnny running off to the cannabis dispensary, and thinking like there's just everything was wrong with that one. If you're able to pull it and show it, let's show the audience, because one to me was like, if OCS was close to offside, maybe 1 foot over, the AGLC was way the fuck over. Like, I mean, way over.
Like that was straight up video game look. That was straight up. And here's the thing, like, I'm going on they must have taken it down, because I'm on the AGLC's Instagram. I'm trying to find this post. I remember watching it when it was still up, but it's I don't think it's here anymore. So I think they took the backlash and took that down.
Listen, I'm all for pushing the boundaries. All for pushing the boundaries. I think, you know, the hard part for this one is clearly, you know, we work in the space of marketing and promotion and supporting brands and doing what we can do. We try to remain as compliant as possible. We seek legal advice when we need to. But that one, I mean, like, this to me is just, it's packaging branding with Skittles on it. Like, it's the same type of thing. Like, when you talk about a draw, I get, you know, AGLC's Instagram account's probably age gated, but it doesn't mean that. Like, it's almost a slap in the face to me, right? Like, do as we say, not as we do type of situation.
Absolutely.
And that was the one. And Katherine did a great job of saying, listen, this is offside for this reason. And the other side of it was, how can you get away with this? So the OCS one I'd question, but as soon as I saw her post with the AGLC, I was like, no fucking way. Yeah. Like, this is so far offside. Yeah, I don't know what else to say.
I'm also kind of shocked in that same realm of social, you know, it's always been a challenge, as we know, but I'm still shocked today. I still see brands posting. It's crazy because you see, it's hard not to see the brands talking about they've been taken down, they've been, you know, they've been blacklisted and all that other stuff. But then you still see other brands posting blatant with the THC logo, with, you know, with their packaging, with the nug shots, and it's like I understand we want to change and again push boundaries, but be smart about this. Like, you need to abide by those basics, right? That's the reason we keep our account fairly clean. Yeah, to be able to bring this content to you guys. You know. Just you're being asked to be taken down. Like, it's just use your profile more for branding, communicate your messaging, all that other stuff. Like, you know, there are other platforms you can post your nug shots on, your packaging and all that other stuff, right?
You know, you want to put that out there, go to X, but you know, maybe outline some of, you know, our criteria, because you always catch me. I'm like, oh, I'm going to get this out, and you're like, whoa, hold on. So I know on the high flyer side, like the high flyer account, we've gotten in trouble many times, many times. Legacies, we've tried our best to remain as, you know, squeaky clean as possible, despite our content. But we're trying to share these messages, right? The messages from the industry, the information, you know, stories. So we can't afford to have it taken down. It's also part of our livelihood and our ability to expand our network and continue to grow and continue to have these stories and sponsorship, right? But what do we maybe just outline some of the no-nos that you should never do? Because let's not forget, Instagram was originally a photo sharing app, right? They have AI that knows how to recognize what's in a photo better than probably anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that red THC logo is the number one. That's instantly going to get picked out. That algorithm has been trained on that logo 1,000 times over, 100,000 times over. So that's a big no-no. Sharpie those out or take those out. All of your copy in your descriptions, not to mention copy, it can scan for text in an image as well. So you want to make sure that the image is clean of the words cannabis, you know, infused pre-rolls,
THC,
all those
CBD,
THC, CBD.
Any trigger word.
Yeah, and as frustrating as that can be, you want to communicate that stuff. But again, Instagram is a tool for you, more in this case, or at least in the current climate, to communicate your brand messaging rather than the actual products themselves. You know, it doesn't take much to go into tools like, you know, Envato Elements and things like that and build mock-ups of your packaging that don't have all the other stuff on them, right? So build, if you want to post, you know, packaging and things like that, build your mock-ups. I'll provide some links in the description to some of the mock-ups that we've used to build packaging that looks and will not get flagged by the algorithms, right?
And you don't need, like, our audience, they're cannabis, right? They're within the industry. So you don't have to say cannabis. You don't have to put THC percentages, right? You could put just the numbers, and they're not necessarily going to get picked up. But
the other one that's actually really crucial, and it doesn't affect us as much, but it can sometimes, you want to avoid the words sale or sales or anything,
On
even if you're
now,
a cannabis related account. You want to avoid those words because it can trigger a selling of regulated goods or selling of illegal goods flag with those guys as well. So you want to keep that stuff clean. If you really, what I've heard most about this is if you really want to share an image or a video that's got any of those elements in there, your best bet, if you have to share it, is put it in your story. Don't put it in a reel that lives on your account. Put it in a story that disappears after that 24-hour threshold, right? That's the that's the best way to do it.
We've never been flagged on a story.
I don't think so.
Like
No,
not on the high flyer side. That's the side I
personally.
always get. And that's why we get tagged and collabed a lot. And so for anyone that's like, these assholes aren't accepting this or saying anything, it's because on the legacy side, we have to be super clean and careful. Like we've got eyeballs on us, right? The provincial regulators, Health Canada, they're watching what we do because we weave it pretty close sometimes. So, we're very careful not to come off as promoting, even though it's kind of what we're doing. And we would argue that, if we ever got chastised and sent a letter, I think there'd be a mutiny. Watch for a GoFundMe potentially. Knock on wood, put that in the universe. It's never going to happen, but it's necessary.
Knock,
right?
knock, Mr. Kirk Dussau.
Yeah, yeah. We've got lawyers are on standby. Let's just say, but I think that it's important, and there's a lot of other channels. I'll say channels because they could be brands, they could be services. There's other podcasts. Love what 11 and Winnie do with Disciplined Stoners. Like how they. Guys, how have you not been flagged? I mean, you're blasting dubs on on there. I've seen THC logos. I never want to see you get taken down, but it's just one catch, and all of a sudden you're screwed.
Yeah. So the last thing I read, which is interesting, the last thing I read about the Instagram algorithm and how it's banning accounts is it's not necessarily this post gets you taken down. It's the ratio of content that you have that breaks those guidelines, right? So if you have 3,000 posts and only 100 of them break those rules, you might not see much. But as soon as you cross a threshold, and I don't know what this is, but there's a ratio of how much of your content breaks that rule. That's what's triggering those. So that's why you're finding people getting close to 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 followers. They have enough content on there to all of a sudden that ratio changes and all of a sudden their account's gone.
The other side of that is your competition hates you, right? I don't know if this is the case, but our friends over at VCC, Victoria Cannabis Company, I think they've had 3 accounts taken down inside of a very small period of time. And when I had asked Kip about it, he said, I don't know if we're going to return. I'm not sure if they have returned. But to me, like I was looking at their Farmgate stuff, right? And then they had their Farmgate backup one, and it was clean. Like it's clean. The only thing I can think of in this case is a competitor was not happy that they're, drawing business, and they should be drawing business. They're an incredible company with an incredible product. But come on, tattletaling, like just fuck off with this shit. Like it's just
it's unfortunate. It definitely does happen. I bet.
I think the worst is when and we know of this. I'm not going to name names. We know of complaints that have happened and where they came from. But you're doing the same thing. Your content is the exact same. And really, it's just, whether it's jealousy, whatever it might be, just get better, do better, just in general. So looking forward to the holiday special coming up. We've got a lot of feedback on that. We put some teaser posts out. Are we dropping that on Christmas Eve on the 24th? Are we going to drop it that day?
I have it listed right now on the thing as the 24th. We'll see. We'll see what that looks like.
I'm just thinking people busy, but maybe it's a nice time for them to, get in front of a fire with a doob and, kick back with some really cool people. Not us, our guests.
Yeah. I think the majority of our watches and content come from the social breakout after. So I don't think the day is super important on when it drops. Ideally, as long as it's that Christmas week, but content will be dropping for weeks after that with all those clips that will generate from it.
It's going to be fun. A little bit stressed about it. And I think more so just we need a contingency date for recording, right? Because God knows with the weather. And there's a lot. Like we've got a lot planned for that day. So it's going to be fun. Christmas hats, optional. We'll see. I don't know. Today's going to be a fun episode. We've got 2 guests today. Jonathan Carfield, original founder of Aveo. We're going to find out why it's called Aveo now, because there was some turmoil in his early career with getting that formed. And obviously the best tech when it comes to vapes, as far as I'm concerned. Especially love their forward thinking on sustainability. That just blows my mind. Now, if you think of the recycle programs, how that's going to work, industry, we need to solve that problem.
Yeah, if I could find that stigma grow like Dab and Go, something similar in a sustainable, something I wasn't afraid to throw out. I mean, you're always going to have a battery, so that's one thing. But if I could find something like that, more sustainable.
Oh yeah, Jonathan's big on that. We're gonna love his story. Our audience is gonna love it. And then we've got Aaron Anderson from Tricanna. Aaron is a fucking OG legend. Like, this guy has seen it all into the lead up to legalization. Now he's with Tricanna. Tricanna's awesome, but Aaron is incredible. And his story, I mean, we had a meeting with him. Was it earlier this week or last week? I think it was David Brown had reached out and said, "Hey, let's break down data fees." And I'm like, "Okay, no problem." He's like, "You should involve Aaron." And I'm like, "Well, Aaron actually happens to be on this week or next week." But I tagged him in and we had this meeting, and holy shit, I had no idea what's going on in that world of the data deals. It seems like there's good and bad. There is no ugly. It's good and it's bad. I don't know if there's a middle ground, but and we won't spend too much time on that necessarily. We would like to get his input on it, but sharing his story, what a wild ride. His parents were OGs. Yeah, that's going to be awesome. Great episode. So we'll be right back with Jonathan Carfield of Aveo right after this break.
Breadstack e-commerce. It might be time to upgrade.
All right, welcome back, everyone. We're joined by Jonathan Carfield of Aveo. Jonathan, thanks for joining Legacies.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. It's I've been waiting to share your story. I found it very mesmerizing, but also like holy shit factor when Keith had introduced us. So very much looking forward to this, and I want to be able to provide the background because you're joining us not in North America today, and we're going to explain why. So it's quite late your time. Appreciate it. It's midday our time. But when we connected, I didn't realize the backstory quite as much. And I think Keith had just kind of said, "Listen, just connect with Jonathan. Hear his story, and then go from there." And I was like, "Oh my God, how soon can we get you on Legacies to share this?" So I do appreciate it. I know it's late. At least for you. Anyways, let's walk back in time if we could, Jonathan, and kind of understand how you entered the cannabis industry. And let's see if my memory serves me correct. It was Washington State originally, was it not, when you started dabbling and understanding this crazy industry to come?
It was, yeah. It was 2014 in a small town called Alder, Washington, which was well, the town doesn't even really exist anymore, but it's on the way to Mount Rainier, so it's very popular during the summers. And my wife Hannah's family owns a small convenience store out by a very popular campground out there, and her parents ran into some challenges with the store and required our help. So Han and I, we were actually both working in South Korea at the time, and we went back to help her parents during the summer. Yeah.
All right. And so during that time, what was it that you discovered? So 2014, I mean, Cali had already been doing its own thing. And what I would imagine there's no cannabis scene happening in Korea. So farthest from the thing, especially, Wes shared some of the things going on in South Korea right now. So you went back to help out. What was it that dawned on you during that time that you're like, hey, there's a cannabis market that's starting up here? I think what really stood out when we had connected was how you brought a certain level of organization to dispensaries and those in the accessory field at the time. But so what happened when you arrived back to assist? What was going on at that time?
Yeah, so admittedly, Han and I were not very familiar with cannabis. I had occasionally used it a few times when I was in college with friends, and I had friends that grew and were, I'd say, much more involved than I was. But Washington was starting to talk about legalization from a collective garden medical program to a state licensed recreational model. So there was legal medical marijuana dispensaries. You had to go and get a green card or a medical card, which was kind of a big, kind of a sham.
They were all a sham, really. I mean, at the end of the day.
Yeah, you talk with some video doctor, and they kind of coach you to answer certain questions, and then all of a sudden, after you give them $80, you got yourself a medical card. And so my wife has a background in marketing. I had a background in finance and software and technology. We were helping out her parents that who were classic Korean immigrants, South Korean, not North Korean. And they were convenience store owners, and so we were helping out during some challenges that they were having. And it was actually Hannah's mother that had suggested that maybe they should start putting some pipes in the convenience store that was next to this huge campground, because everyone would come in and they smelled like weed because they were going camping and
getting high.
And we were very unfamiliar with it, and we're like, all right, we'll go look and see if maybe we can find some pipes or something. So we did, and we brought them to the store, and we threw them on the counter, and we sold through really quickly. And all of a sudden, we're like, gosh, maybe there's an opportunity here. So we found a trade show in Las Vegas. It was, I think it was called the Smoke and Tobacco Show. We decided to go there, and when we went there, we found when we walked through this expo, and we found all these different glass blowers and paraphernalia companies, from herb grinders and stash jars and dab tools and all these things. So we decided, hey, you know what? Why don't we grab a bunch of these other products and let's throw into the store. We did that. They sold really well. Her parents had another location. They said, hey, you know what? Could you put stuff in the other store? So we did that. And then they had a couple of friends that also owned convenience stores that said, hey, can you guys supply this for us? And I was really fascinated with the convenience store, just with how it was ran, because it was something that I never really thought of. I've walked convenience stores millions of times, never really thought, how are they managed? How are they, what are the distribution companies like? How are they merchandised? How are they restocking, all this stuff? But we quickly understood this. And what I realized was that we can put stuff in here, but we have to constantly be fulfilling product. And that's something that Coca-Cola did, Frito-Lay does, there's Southern Wine, all these different companies doing this stuff. And in addition to it, we needed a way to merchandise and present and price everything. So we really looked at the Coca-Cola model. And if you look at Coca-Cola, it's like, hey, they bring this cooler into your store. There's a planogram. Each shelf has a very specific placement for, here's your sodas, here's your energy drinks, here's your waters, here's your juices, here's your milks, here's your protein drinks, all these different products. And so we did the same thing for paraphernalia, and essentially we made a turnkey head shop. We made these display cases. Here's your pipes, here's your grinders, here's your up tools, here's your storage things, here's your butane for your torches and all of this stuff. And we made them for multiple locations. And then this one guy who walked in the store one day said, hey, he's like, you should be putting these display cases inside of the dispensaries, these collective parties. And I'm like, I've never been in one of these. I have no idea what you're talking about. So he explained it to me. So we went and we talked to a dispensary down the street and said, hey, this is what we're doing. And the guy was like, this is fantastic. He's like, we would love to have one of these display cases.
Yeah.
And so we started actively selling these, and next thing we know, within 12 months, I think we were in 260, 270 locations throughout Oregon. And we were the largest distributor for Grav Labs and Chameleon Glass, skillet tools and candy pens and, vape devices and all this stuff. And then quickly after that, these dispensary owners started telling their other vendors that were actually selling the weed that, hey, you guys need to be like these guys, because like they show up every week. They've got tablets. They actually, when we call them, they show up. Like, it's just being responsible, I guess, right?
Right.
And there are complaints because a product will go unfulfilled, like we'll run out of product and we won't have this certain edible or this BHO or shatter or flower products. So then we started getting into actually carrying cannabis product and distributing that as well.
Okay. Yeah.
And the very first product that we had was a product from a girl that came up from California. It was a organic, vegan, gluten-free granola bar that was, THC infused.
Mm-hmm.
She was in 45 locations, and when we spoke with her, we said, oh gosh, we can probably get you to 120, 140 locations within 30 days. Get us a distribution price and we'll make it happen. So we did, and sure enough, we expanded her footprint.
Wow.
Ochre Slips was this THC a Listerine breath strip that won like a High Times product of the year, like back in like 2015 or something. Same thing. We took them on and boom,
Wow.
in 200 locations. And then what really set it off, and this is, kind of the gotcha moment, was there was this product called Excel Vape, and it was this guy from California that came up from Santa Barbara, and he was slinging, it was a pre-filled glass 510 thread cartridge, and it was with CO2 oil in it. And he was in multiple locations. A store contacted him and said, hey, you know what? You need to contact Jonathan and Hannah because, they're kind of the kings of distribution. And so we sat down with them, did a similar deal. And that product, like literally just took the industry by storm. We could not sell it fast enough. We could not produce it fast enough. But we also dealt with all of the typical early stage failures that vape hardware can. There was tons of leakage. There was, oftentimes the flavor was bad and but when it worked, it was really good. And even with the dysfunction, people still wanted it. And so that was when we realized that we were onto something. And so we had this thriving business, and then it all got shut down overnight because the state decided to convert into a recreational model, and all the medical shops were shut down.
Oh my God.
They were grandfathered into, state licensing, and it was a lottery system. And so literally all of our customers were shut down overnight, and our business was done. But Excel Vape, the owner of that business was able to secure a license, and he was like, you guys are residents here. You guys have pretty much run my business for me. Mm-hmm. So then that's when we got into being a state licensed operator and producer processor in cannabis. And, we went through the pain of BioTrack and traceability regulations that went around it. And operating in business. And so I think that was, the moment then when we realized that, number one, vape is here to stay. It's a fast growing segment. We also recognized all of the challenges that the hardware provided and what it lacked. And we had spent years during this time trying to find better hardware, and we couldn't. And
how many suppliers were there at that time, Jonathan? Like, I couldn't imagine there was a ton.
Well, I mean, what was happening was that we were using all of these e-cig products,
right.
right? So at the time, it was like there was Congertech and Joytech and eLeaf, and these were very, very common brands in the e-cig world. And so, and that's what everyone was doing, is they were just simply taking e-cig products and trying to make it work. And that's really kind of, when you look at C-Cell today, and Mark Scatterday, who's really, someone who I have tremendous amount of respect for, who really took kind of the C-Cell product, which if you look at C-Cell before cannabis, it was a nicotine brand. It was really designed as a, for mods, and they had replacement coils and whatnot. And then the business kind of changed when they got into cannabis. But he was the first guy that says, hey, you know what, we need to take this device and we need to make it better for cannabis. And they did. And when we saw the first round of C-Cell products come out, we were excited about it. We got some, we tried it out. We said, hey, you know what, it's not perfect, but it's significantly better than what's out there. We contacted C-Cell and said, hey, you know what, like, we're a distribution company. We've got a fairly significant footprint in the Pacific Northwest. How do we become a distributor? And they told us, unfortunately, we've made a decision on certain distributors. We're not expanding or taking on new distributors at this time. And they directed me to a distributor in Washington State. And when they gave me the contact information, I'm like, I know this guy. In fact, he used to be a buyer at a retail store that we supplied. I've got a bigger distribution footprint than them. Why do I have to buy from them? So I complained. Actually, I told C-Cell at the time, I'm like, if you don't allow me to become a distributor for you, I'm going to go to China myself, and I'm going to become your competitor. And so
I'm sure they didn't like that.
Well, I mean, I think they just expected me to just be some random customer just complaining, because I probably wasn't the first one to make that complaint, right?
Right.
And so a year later, and this was in late 2017, we made the commitment that we were going to sell our cannabis business, and that we were going to take the savings that we had from it, and that we were going to move to China, and we were going to learn everything about how to design and manufacture vape devices, and we weren't leaving until we solved it. And so in spring of 2018, we moved to Shenzhen, China permanently.
Wow. That's all in. when I think about going all in, like, that is going all in. Because you hear some of these stories, not necessarily in the cannabis industry, where they're like, we need to fly over and talk to someone in China and find some distribution, and then they come back, right? And then the double down is, well, if you know the language, you can do even better. But for you and family, it's no, we're going to move there to figure this out. What was the challenge when you first started shopping the concept around? Because I think you're like, some of this isn't going to work. We need to build our own factory.
Well, yeah, I mean, so number one, we had made multiple trips to China prior to that decision. And just as you said, we sat down with factories, told them, hey, these are the problems. Again, we're not experts. We're buyers, we're consumers, but we're certainly not engineers and know how these devices intimately work. We had theories. And so, we share this information. The factories are like, oh, yes, like, no problem. Like, we can solve this. We can do this. So, we feel good about it. We go back to the States and we wait for the next round of products and we have failure again. And so we went through that multiple rounds, and so that was the reason why we're like, well, we're just going to go to China and we're just going to do this, because if we're having this problem, and we think we're pretty good at sourcing from China because we can source glass and packaging and other products. But if we can't source these vape devices any better than anyone else can, then it's not just a problem for us, it's a problem for everyone, right? And we recognize if we can solve this problem, then we'll solve the problem for other people as well.
Yeah.
So when we got there, we already knew some people, some suppliers, because we've been buying other items. So certainly anyone who's done business in China, if you're a customer and you're you got money to spend, the Chinese and probably anyone, they'll roll out the red carpet for you. So
Right.
So the first thing that we did is, because we didn't speak Chinese, is that we did need to find a translator that would be able to really just kind of be a tour guide for us and take us around. So our very first person, she was a part-time hire. Her name is Marilyn Ma. She was an engineer, but she really wanted to practice her English. And so, we hired her part-time, and she started, we would find all these factories, and she'd set up meetings with them, and we would just go visit these factories and have meeting after meeting after meeting. And I think it was about after 15 factories we found one, and we didn't really know what we were looking for. I
was just going to ask, like, what was the criteria? Because they weren't necessarily making vape carts, or maybe they were, but was it how nice they were? Were they honest? Could you trust them? Did it feel that they aligned with what you were trying to develop and build?
Yeah. I mean, well, so there were these factories that were producing cartridges. So naturally, it made sense that we were visiting some of these factories and some of these larger e-cig factories. Mm-hmm. But again, you're right. We didn't really. We're not experts. Again, we knew how to buy and sell them. But that's like anyone. I mean, that's just describing a customer. And so we really didn't know what we were looking for. But I think as we visited more factories, I think we started realizing what we needed to find someone that was willing to show us more than just the factory. And what we recognized was that, the factories are just a glorified assembly shop. Right. And if you can't get to the component level, then it doesn't really, you're missing half the picture. And what we recognized is that most of these factories were unwilling to disclose who their suppliers were, right?
Oh,
Because that's the missing part. Like if you don't know how these parts, it's like, if you don't know if the brake pads are good making a car, then you don't know if the brakes are good or not, right?
Yeah.
And so we found this small factory, and they had like 40 workers. That was like one production line and a couple salespeople, and I really liked their salespeople. And they had a couple of cartridges, and quite honestly, they were probably the smallest, least impressive factory out of everyone that we met. But we liked the fact that we thought that we could work with them very closely in a way, because number one, they're a startup and they're desperate for customers, and they're willing to really kind of go above and beyond. And we also realized that if they didn't have a lot of customers today, if we became their biggest customer, then we could have influence on that factory. And that's exactly what happened. And so, we looked at their products and was like, you know what, like, that's a good start. The next thing, we hired an engineer. He was a Canadian guy that was living in China already, and he had a background working in actually with drones, had no business doing stuff with vape devices.
Yeah.
But he was very smart, very technical, knew a hell of a lot more than we did, because again, Han and I are not engineers. And we gave him some cartridges and said, tell us what's wrong with these things. And just kind of off of theory, we started breaking down these cartridges, and he's like, okay, well, this gasket here, this is how, how I would design this gasket compared to, how they're doing it now. And this is why I would do it differently. And as we started doing that, we simply just started making the same products, but just making them better and changing out certain components and looking at things like the way that you do QC. Like, there's certain ways that they'll do measurements of a certain component where our engineer felt like, well, they're only looking at half of the dimension. They're only taking
Right.
measurements of it. They're missing these other measurements as well. And that's part of the oversight. And so as we learned all of this stuff, we launched our first brand of cartridges, which I'm sure Keith has probably mentioned. There's unfortunately some drama around it, but we created the brand AVD, Advanced Vapor Devices, back in 2018. We're the founder, we're the trademark holder of it. We have a contract with the U.S. distributor, and that's that. And naturally, that brand went from 2018 when we started it to now being a very significant brand. And as we had essentially told C-Cell at the time, we're going to build a brand that competes very aggressively with you, and that's exactly what we did. When you look at kind of like where we are today, I kind of look at things in kind of like classic education. So from 2014 to 2018, we spent time in the cannabis industry in Washington State and Oregon. Feel like we got a bachelor's degree in cannabis. We're not masters or PhDs.
Sure. Yeah, it's that 4-year term. Yeah.
But it's enough to make us dangerous, right? And then from 2018 to 2022, we were in Shenzhen, and that really, we now have a bachelor's degree in manufacturing and just understanding supply chains, setting up factories. As I mentioned on previous call, after that first factory, then in 2018, we started working with. In 2019, we outgrew that factory, so we built our first factory in Baoan and in Shaojing. That factory grew, significantly. We started taking over multiple floors, started running out of space. So then we built another factory in a nearby area called Fuyang. And then thirdly, the factory that we are today, we really kind of followed the Apple Foxconn model, where the iPhone was originally manufactured in Shenzhen, where we were as well. Cost of living, housing, real estate prices as Shenzhen exploded and grew, became too expensive. And so what did Foxconn do? They went to an area called Jinzhou, which is in between Shanghai and Shenzhen. And they expanded and they moved most of their production there. And so Jinzhou is called iPhone City. And so that's where our factory is today. So we literally use similar workforce as kind of the Foxconn Apple ecosystems that's there. The partner that we work with is a major supplier for those companies, and so they've got a huge footprint there. And we lease space in their factory, and we utilize their workers for our production today.
Oh, that's wild. So what was originally, AVD, we know that there's, you can touch on that more if you want. But when did Aveo become Aveo? And I want you to share the story behind the sustainable plastics, right? Because this became there's nothing out there. Fuck it, let's invent it. Let's figure it out ourselves. But what, again, share what you would like, because I think that there is some story, and Keith did share. There's information throughout the internet, right? Where we can find that as well. But when did it shift from AVD to Aveo, and you've made your stamp now? Distribution, everything I know, everyone that understands Aveo, especially at the company level throughout Canada, especially, we're close to them, they know that it's superior technology, and at a better price point. Like, it's a no-brainer for me. Anyways.
Yeah. There's a couple of fascinating things there. So one of the things I think that happens with success, so when you have multiple parties that are growing up together, we really decided at one point that we needed to focus on one part of the business, because there's two parts of the business. When I look at, I think, entrepreneurship or businesses, there's the product development, R&D, supply chain, operations, really the back office stuff that is critical to producing tremendously great products. And then there's the front office side, which is your sales and marketing and customer facing, and you're out there going to trade shows, and you're going to lunch and doing promotional stuff and doing training and really the face of the business. And you have to have both to run a really great company. You can't just build a great product and expect it to sell itself. At the same time, you can't be a great sales organization if you don't have a great product to stand behind, right? And in the very early days of ABD, I was doing both, right? I was spending all this time in China every day learning supply chains and design and engineering, and just getting a crash course on all this stuff that I did not go to school for. My background is economics and finance, not engineering, is structural design. And then at nighttime, I'm on the phone and I'm doing deals and emails and phone calls and whatnot, and traveling back and forth. And long story short, I got physically sick. I ended up getting. I thought I was literally having a heart attack, and I was rushed to the hospital, and essentially I just was going too hard. So we realized at that time that we needed to find appropriate sales channels and distribution partners in the U.S. that can really handle that side, because if we're going to be in China and we're going to commit to it, we need to spend our time every single day devoted on learning, manufacturing, supply chains, leveraging our surroundings, because this is a very unique and important time for us to soak up as much as we could. And so we went out there and we found, third parties to distribute our products. And through that, we found a partner that was fantastic. Mutually together, we were a very, very tough organization to beat, and the C-Cells and the other groups out there in the world certainly recognized that we were a very difficult group to compete against, because we had two sides of the business that operated really fundamentally. Long story short, we were the owner of the brand, and we were the licensee of the technology and the products. The distributor wanted to merge the companies together. We went through a due diligence process and evaluating that to see if that made sense. We chose that we didn't feel that a merger of the two companies made sense for us. And when that decision happened, I kind of think of it like dating a little bit, and one side wants to get married and the other side doesn't. And it's kind of like left eye, like burning down someone's house after being Jake older. And so so there, unfortunately, it's kind of like this civil war kind of broke out. We let lawyers do their lawyering and stuff like that, and legal stuff can take time and years for that to handle. So, we have a good strategy in place. We think that that's going to get handled. And at the end of the day, we think that everyone's going to get what they deserve out of it. With that said, we needed to continue operating, while that's going on. And there's, we're maintaining a contractual agreement. We needed to move in a different direction. And so when you look at Aveo today, again, it is what I would say the next level of, I think, our business, where we don't consider ourselves a cartridge company. We really consider ourselves more of a materials organization, and more of an intellectual property organization. The first 4 years was just learning manufacturing supply chains. Now, if you look at Aveo, what we have today, we have real intellectual property that we've developed. As you mentioned, we went out there and said, you know what, we hate the traditional plastic and all the plastic that's being, thrown away and wasted, and that's polluting our planet. So we looked at PLA and recycled plastics, ocean reclaimed plastics, everything that was out there. But we looked at it not from a environmentalist that doesn't really understand private industry. We looked at it as entrepreneurs that said, hey, you know what, we have a certain price point. We have to maintain a level in this. And we couldn't find anything out there that really was an alternative to traditional plastics at the price points we needed. And so we kept a very open mind about that, said, you know what, how do we do this? How do we solve this problem? And through a series of exploration, we developed a hemp reinforced plastic with a biodegradable enzyme. That's kind of interesting because it's kind of taking elements of what we were able to find in China. But then the biodegradable enzyme that we work with is a US-based company. And we bring that enzyme into China and we formulate it with our plastics. And what we have today is a very affordable plastic that has a very accelerated degradation process, where you look at traditional plastics today, so it'll take 80 to 90, 100 plus years for that to break down in any type of landfill or marine environment. Our plastic will naturally break down in 3.5 years.
Let's pause on that for a second. 3.5 years compared to the 8. Now, I'd shared this with Wes after our meeting, and he was just like mind blowing. How? Why? Let me ask you this, Jonathan. Why are more? And I know you're moving into other spaces, going like, we need to bring this plastics, like hospitality, right? Huge. But there's just so many uses where I can see this as an opportunity to better our planet.
Yeah, and I think when you get into business, and there's what you learn in school and in textbooks, and then I think there's the reality of it. Yeah. And I think that the problem that you run into is that any type of disruptive or innovative technology isn't always going to be easily adopted or embraced, because it's competing with the legacy technology that is already embedded in society, right?
That makes sense.
And if you think about plastics are owned by petroleum companies.
Yes.
They have a little bit of money, and they've got a little bit of influence.
A little bit, just a bit.
And they probably got a few politicians in their back pocket. So when you start thinking about what we're trying to do, it really is a classic David and Goliath story, kind of similar to what we did with C-Cell. We were this upstart, couple that knew nothing about e-cigs going up against the world's largest e-cig factory and beating them at their own game, right? Yeah. And now we're kind of doing the same thing with plastics, where we're saying, hey, you know what? We've got an uphill battle. Right now, a lot of the work that we do is policy work. Hana's in South Korea working with government officials, attending Senate hearings and actually changing.
Wow.
What the alternative facts that have been presented and really adopted by politicians in South Korea. Right now, I spend a good amount of my time working with some very, very sophisticated experts that come from private industry and that have a focus on sustainability, that are lecturers and guest speakers at the United Nations on waste and plastic waste. Indorama, which is one of the largest plastic manufacturers in the world, but has a very, very sophisticated recycling collection and redistribution model, remanufacturing model. The chief sustainability officer, someone that I've become very close to, and he's really almost mentored me on kind of like how we move into sustainability and how we are able to influence certain regulators and policymakers. Yeah. So when you look at this evolution of kind of where Hana and myself have gone from since 2014, we went from being these knuckleheads that knew nothing about walls that was selling trinkets, right? Yeah. To then being a cannabis operator in a state licensed model, then to being a vape hardware manufacturer in China, to being really materials experts, and now I think full circle getting into sustainability. And so everything that we do today is kind of a application of our knowledge of what we have today, but trying to make sustainability not just work from a environmental aspect, but it comes down to how do you make sustainability and profitability coexist? Right. And that's the challenge, right? Yeah. Because let's face it, in business is about making money. Mm-hmm. Greed is what drives great business. Right. And the reason why sustainability doesn't work in most businesses today is because it doesn't solve the greed factor. And greed is good if you're a private company, right? If it's designed to make money. If you're a nonprofit, that's a completely different thing.
Sure.
And so, that I think that has been the biggest challenge. And it's one of the things that we get so excited about where we are today, because when you look at the innovation and the patents that we've filed, the designs that we have, and this massively growing problem that I'm going to call disposable vape pens, right?
Yeah.
Not just in cannabis, but globally in tobacco and nicotine.
Yeah.
Like, we now have a electronic device that's treated like a consumable. It's treated like a candy bar, right? They're purchased every day and consumed and tossed away. When you look at the nicotine space, like you've got people blowing through these disposables in 2 to 3 days, and buying another one. Maybe not as aggressively in cannabis, but it's there. And so when you look at the plastic issue, we're like, well, holy shit! I mean, that's massive in itself, and just the whole microplastics problem that exists. It's not just about plastic building up; it's the fact that, like, once these plastics do eventually break down, they're eroding like sand, right? But the problem with plastic is that when plastic erodes, it's lightweight and it gets airborne. So we breathe it, we drink it, we eat it. Like, it's everywhere, and it's infesting all parts of our society. Wow. That's a huge problem with plastics today. So we think that we've got a tremendous solution to that. That's affordable, that works, solves a lot of the problems. Because in addition to the fact that our plastic breaks down in 3.5 years, it also doesn't leave any microplastics. Because the way that our plastics work is that we attract living natural organisms, microorganisms in living soils and marine bodies that are attracted to our plastics, and we shrink the molecular structure or the polymer size of our plastics so that these living organisms can actually eat the plastic at an accelerated rate, and it becomes fertilizer. So there's no microplastic.
That's wild, man.
As a result,
that's wild.
Yeah, wow. But then
Okay, go ahead. I was gonna ask. I wanted to understand. So, was Aveo born at that time then? So you're like, we're moving to the next level, but you need the plastic. You need to solve this. There's nothing sustainable or that aligns with your ethos. We need to invent our own. We bring in the minds to do so. We get the plastic. Because I want to shift into earth and understanding, because, disposable, Keith knows this. I get very passionate about the disposable side of the industry, especially in cannabis, because this category is on the rise. Yeah. Like, I thought, we're coming into it, there's disposables available. That'll eventually die down. People will turn to flower. Boy, was I wrong. Was I ever wrong? Right. So I guess 2 questions, then I'll let you continue to go on it. But is that the point in time where Aveo was born? So you've moved away from AVD. That's going on in the background, which I'm sure is a headache and stressful, everything going on, but you turn it over to lawyers. They do their thing. But now you've got this plastic.
Well, so it was a combination of the AVD thing and also C-Cell. And so I don't know if you guys are familiar, but around the same time, C-Cell decided to file an ITC complaint and patent infringement against like 28 companies for patent infringement. And it was a massively big thing, and it was probably one of the scariest things that I've ever faced.
Oh, jeez.
And what was wild about it was that they targeted, I don't know, something like 28, 30 companies. But when you looked at and read through the ITC complaint, they had also targeted 2 individuals. Okay. And those 2 individuals was Hannah and myself.
What?
So, if you think about all these other companies, they've all got founders and CEOs that run these. These companies aren't companies with no people.
Right.
But for some reason, we were targeted specifically because we were the ones they were really going after.
Okay.
They didn't know how to stop ABD, right?
Got
so
it.
They went after all of our companies that we were associated with, our distributors and us specifically, because we were the ones that scared the holy crap out of them.
Yeah.
And that they didn't know how to stop. And they thought that, we're this multi-billion-dollar publicly traded, largest e-cig manufacturer in the world. We're just going to throw money at this and just bury the costs, right?
Yeah.
And what we realized at that time is that, number one, we don't understand intellectual property very well, and we needed to learn really fast. We needed to crack courses. We're like, are we in fact infringing on their intellectual property? Because we don't think that we are. So, we had to hire some really good IP attorneys. We went through it. We're like, you know what? We don't think there's a case here. But I think it was at that point, though, when we realized that, you know what, as a brand, yeah, we might be making money today. We might have this great brand and we're getting customers to buy our products and whatnot, but we don't own any intellectual property. We're just making the same stuff that everyone else is making. We just happen to make it a little bit better, or we market it a little bit better. But at the end of the day, as there's a race to the bottom and this becomes all commodity, we don't have any intellectual property. We don't own anything. There's no innovation behind us. And that was the light bulb that went off and said, you know what, Aveo needs to be a company that really takes all the knowledge that we have and starts creating intellectual property.
Very cool. Cool.
Yeah. So C-Cell, if you're out there, thank you for letting.
They say that the competition is what forces you to the next level, right? And in your case, this is very true. It's unfortunate that you've had to go through it that way. I could just imagine receiving notice of such. I couldn't imagine. Like, geez.
Yeah, I mean, it was brutal, and and at the end of the day, we're just trying to make really good products. If you think about what's the purpose of us doing this, it's and I think one thing that I didn't mention is that Hannah, during this time, she had never touched weed before. I mean, she'd barely even drank alcohol. She was like a Friday night Bible school girl, right? Like, she's the girl that I always made fun of. But she had this medical problem for years while we were married that traditional doctors didn't seem to be able to solve. And a guy that walked into our convenience store every day to get his Coca-Cola pack of cigarettes, he was growing weed for some kids and making Rick Simpson oil. And he was telling me about it. And one day I was just sharing, hey, Hannah's got these problems and we don't, and it's frustrating. We end up in the emergency room a couple times a month, and, the medical bills are terrible, and just the anxiety and, fear that she has because the prescription drugs that they give her don't work. And so when she feels this pain coming up, it actually creates more anxiety, which then makes it even worse because she knows that there's nothing she can do to stop it, to the point where she didn't even want to leave the house. And so he was like, hey, have you ever considered, medical marijuana? And we're just like, we're willing to try anything. And so we did. And like so many stories we've heard time and time again, she's never been to the hospital ever since she started smoking weed.
Wow.
And so that was the other piece to it, why we're like, there's something about cannabis here. We want to get involved. Yeah. We're not growers, we're not dealers. We don't have all the experience that these other guys have. We didn't go to jail for it, like all this stuff. But we believe in it and we want to learn as much as we can. Yeah. And so that's what got us into this space. And so, it's been challenging, I think, experiencing the success that we've had when all that we wanted to do was make really fucking good products that were safe and reliable, because I know that Hannah uses these devices.
Right.
And if she relies on these devices and it's changed her life and impacted her life in a way that has been tremendous, and it's impacted my life because I don't have to worry about this as a husband.
Yeah.
Right. Then this does a lot of good for a lot of people.
That's right.
And that's all that we want to do at the end of the day. Is just make really great, safe, reliable products that we can trust.
Yeah. Well, and you certainly have done that. It reminds me of the Juul story, as they were, I think I watched the documentary or it was a movie on that. And I knew some of the story previously, and, as it was forming up, and they knew there was challenges with their vape products at the time. And there was a massive failure in percentages of leakage. And I remember them just saying, fuck it, just ship it. We've got an audience, but in stark contrast, on your side, you're looking at it as, look, we've got an opportunity here. It's helping Hannah. That's one. You're starting to understand things, but you're seeing the failures and the disappointment, because I think that's that's part of, the biggest picture here, which is the disappointment. There's a lot of vape failure still in the market. Those that are not using Aveo products, there is. And these individuals that are buying them, they don't always have a ton of disposable income. They're looking at vapes as an opportunity because, dollar cost averaging at the end of the day, I can get more product for, the same amount of money. Why wouldn't you? And then it stops working or clogs or it's leaking. And it's a horrible experience. But what do? They go right back and buy the same thing because some of these brands that are putting this shit out, they have massive marketing budgets. Yeah. So they continue to sell to these individuals, not realizing. And for me personally, I would love to see where Aveo is. That's the part that's getting marketed more so that the consumer knows, right? It's no different, going to buy a luxury car or a supercar and you can see it. I'm not in that category, but look, it's got Brembo brakes on it. Okay, I know this thing's going to stop, right? Yeah. Where I'm going and buying a vape and I'm like, okay, this is made with an Aveo vape cart. I can trust this. I'm going to get right to the bottom of it. It's not going to burn. It's not going to leak. And it's sustainable. Like that's just, to me, it's, as a brand operating in North America and throughout the world as different regions are forming up, I would want to align with that, right? Like, it's just an easy sell to me. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. I get it. Like you said, greed, right? There's greed involved in a lot of cases too.
Yeah. So as we've gone through this journey of learning, and I think we're moving into this, what I would kind of call our final stage of sustainability, because I think sustainability it's the cherry on top, right? It's what makes the world beautiful if you can pull it off.
Right.
It is, because it's like, hey, now I get to make a lot of money, but I also get to sleep good at night knowing that I'm creating a better future. And I think that's been a challenge for most companies out there. And so I kind of think of sustainability kind of to like the early days of vape, where consumers had a bad experience of it. And because of that bad experience, then that's carried over. And so when they look at a vape product, then they're like, oh, I don't know if I want to try that again because I did have that experience. Or kind of like when I was in high school and, I was a freshman and a bunch of senior guys decided to give me a bunch of chewing tobacco at a football game and failed to tell me that you're not supposed to swallow it. Right? Well, I've never touched.
Same mistake, man. I made the same mistake.
I've never touched.
Never again. Neither have I. Yeah.
Yeah. But so I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, hey, we want to be sustainable. We're going to go down this path. We're going to try to find a solution. And then they do. And then they realize that like, it's not possible. Right. Well, I feel like even today, like when we go out there and say, hey, you know what, we've got a solution that we think really makes a lot of sense. But either they don't believe you or they automatically assume, oh, this is too expensive. And you know what, like guys, we're fighting for margins right now. Like we can't afford.
Yeah.
Like every penny matters. Sustainability is out of the question for us. And so the biggest challenge that I think we have right now is overcoming those assumptions that are out there, because I think that what we've done, and again, call me crazy, and I've been called crazy many, many times, but I think that we're on to something that potentially changes the world. And, we were talking earlier today that, we're not going to MJ BizCon, we're not up for, product of the year, the MJs or anything like that, because we don't care about that stuff. Like we're really about trying to change and make an impact on industries, and we do it in ways that maybe aren't very sexy. And when you look at the Earth product, and I'm
glad you're moving into Earth, because this one gets me really excited, Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, I should have brought some props here, and I really didn't. Well, I guess I got a couple. So if you look at, it's hard to understand, but this here is the internal guts of our vape pen, right?
Yeah.
And this is the internal guts of our palm device. Now, what we realized when we were in China making these devices is that number one, we knew that we knew it was going to go towards disposables. We saw what happened with e-cig. They went from like these mod devices to these systems to single-use disposables, and once the single-use disposables gets in your hands, you're not going to get rid of it.
Yeah.
It's here to stay. They're too easy. They're too convenient. When you look at other industries and the whole disposable consumerism that has just kind of taken over in all aspects, whether it's from food to clothing to other devices, it's just where we are today. And so we knew that disposables was where this was going to end up.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with these disposables, though, is, again, they're originally designed to be as cheap as possible. And what that means is that you have a battery that is hardwired to a tank
Mm-hmm.
that has no ability to be recycled or repurposed or
Right.
really have any value at the end of the day. It's like a car that has wheels on it that you can't remove and replace. And once the wheels are done,
Your
you
car's
just
done.
throw away the entire car.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind of how vape devices are today.
Right.
And what we recognized was that, like, simplistically, what we need to be able to do is, number one, meet the economics of a disposable because of the convenience factor. But we have to make the battery and the atomizer, we have to make it detachable in a way that's where it's not hardwired, so that you can interchange the pieces.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to it, you've got these devices that, there's no way of opening it up.
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
done, right? So, like, if you want to try to access it, you physically have to break it, because typically what's happening is that they're using like a friction fit to kind of enclose it. So there's no way of opening it up. And I get it too, because these things need to be tamper proof. They need to be shock resistant. Like, like the very early days of 510 thread was a twist on mouthpiece that you could twist off. Well, hey, we can't do that because someone could open it up and they can contaminate it, right? So you have these competing forces, right? That's making it difficult. So number one, we had to create this jailbreak function that said, hey, you know what? Once this device has been fully consumed, I got to be able to reopen it in a way that I don't damage the device and everything that's inside of it. So this was back several years ago. In our 510 thread cartridges, we had a problem in Michigan State because our easy press mouthpieces that went onto our 510 thread cartridges made it easy to cap down. It locked. You could do batches of 50 at a time from an operational efficiency. Vape companies liked it because it was less manpower of carts single, one by one. But the problem is that, like, if I now have to take this cartridge and I have to send it to a testing lab to get tested, they can't open it because it's locked. Therefore, they have to break it open. And when they break it open, they're potentially contaminating the oil sample and creating a false positive.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we heard about this problem. And again, for us being these kind of mad scientists, we're like, okay, well, how do we solve this? So we created this unlocking function where essentially, and this isn't one, but you can drop a pin down inside and it'll open up these claws that locks around the center post, and it pushes the claws open so you can open up the mouthpiece, right?
Yeah.
So we made that, we designed it, we filed a patent on it, but we really didn't understand, like, if there's any commercial application, because we were like, oh, hey, like, you know what, guys, you can open this up and you can refill it, all this stuff. And I was like, well, no one wants to refill this thing. Like, it's stupid. It doesn't work. Once you bust the vacuum seal, you're going to have leakage, clogging, all this stuff. It doesn't make sense. So we're like, all right, well, cool. We made this really cool novel function, but it doesn't really have any commercial application. But then when we started looking at a modular approach to a disposable, we're like, okay, number one, we've got to be able to have it lock.
Yeah.
But we've got to be able to unlock it, and then to be able to pull out the guts out case.
Yeah.
So that's necessary. So that's number one. And then number two, if you notice here, I don't have a tank with me, but this is where a tank snaps into it.
Okay.
So instead of hardwired, you can just pop the tank out.
Yeah.
So now, if in theory, if you think about it, this device is used. It's like this, right?
Yeah.
It gets returned to a retailer. We can collect this. We can open it up. We can pull the tank. We can pull the chassis out. We can pop the tank out. We can pop a new tank back in. Put it back in.
It's ready to go again. Wow.
And now you've got a whole new device. Now, if the shell is scratched or damaged, the mouthpiece is damaged, okay, we can replace these. This is a 10-cent part. This is a 10-cent part. The tank is 50 cents. Now we're talking about replacement parts.
Yeah.
We're talking about a device here that has the battery, the charge port, the mic chip that activates the device, the LED light in it, all encompassed together. So these are valuable components that can be utilized again and again and again. Because this battery was designed for 140 recharge cycles, guys.
Wow.
Guess how many times this thing is being recharged after using 2 mil of oil or 1 mil of oil, 3, 4, 5 times, and it's being thrown away? Like,
Jeez.
come on, guys. This is the most wasteful product on the flippin' planet, and it's used as consumable. And we saw this happening, and we were just like, guys, we're a company with a conscience. We can't sit here and just do what everyone else is doing and just care about the short term of making money. We got to solve this problem today, right? But number two, we've got to make it in a way that's compelling for brands to say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to use this device because I care or because I'm a good person or because, ESG is part of my marketing strategy. I need it to impact their bottom line.
Yeah.
So get this device here, if you imagine a company that sells 10,000 units a month, right? That means every month they're buying 10,000 new pieces from China, right?
Jeez.
Like clockwork.
Yeah.
However, if you look at deposit return schemes or what's considered bottle bill programs, Canada has one. In the States, I think there's 11 states, Michigan, Colorado, New York, California, I think Oregon, Washington, Arizona. Bottle bill programs where there's a financial incentive for the consumer to bring the device back, there's a 70% participation rate. So now we have a pilot program that's launching in Michigan very soon. If we can get 50% of these devices back, even 50%, we can collect these devices. And again, with the spare parts of a tank, mouthpiece, and case, I can take this device and I can rebuild it for 40% of the price of buying a new one. So now if I can get 50% of these back, and I can rebuild them for 40% of the cost of a new one, the numbers now become incredibly compelling, and this is a competitive advantage for companies to be sustainable. I don't know if there's another program out there in the world like this. Now, this may sound very arrogant, but I'm trying to think. I don't know if there's another program out there that has that strong of a business case that allows you to actually make money by being disposable or by being sustainable. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's one of the reasons I loved it so much. But my biggest question mark was, how do you engage them? How do you get the participation at the consumer level, right? And that's where I think yourself and we had touched on it, and I've touched on it with Keith, is it's the bottle return programs. I mean, and people do it for even 10 cents. Like they're taking bottles or cans and they're returning them for 10 cents. And yet, they're spending $30, $40 on a case of beer or something like that. I don't know, maybe it's more now, I have no idea. But only 10 cents. So because you want that participation, you want the consumer, but at the same time, they also need to be on side with, this is bettering the environment, right? It's keeping this out of landfill. It can be reused. And maybe some, we get it. Not everyone has the same mindset, but start putting some sort of deposit requirement on it. Now it makes total sense. So it's great to hear that Michigan is potentially adopting this.
Yeah, so essentially right now, I mean, Michigan has been is going to be an interesting case study for us because we're going into markets that already have bottle bill programs there, so consumers are already kind of programmed
Yeah.
to collect and return these devices,
Right.
or not devices, but to bring products back for a deposit credit or refund. So, at the end of the day, when you're first at something, you don't know how it's going to go. And the device is only one part of the equation. The other equation is the program and creating the adoption and the systems. And so, we're excited. We've got some partners that believe as much as we do about this.
Yeah.
We have some great brands that are really excited. We have a network of over 100 retail stores that are super excited. We've got bud tenders that are super excited about it.
Nice.
When you think about, I think, the stickiness of this and the loyalty programs, that everyone's looking for differentiation right now, right? Because at the end of the day, everyone's selling the same stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, just package and I mean, people might get upset with me about this, but to me, the hype is over. Like in the early days of weed, everyone's like, "Oh yeah, like this is like the we're the best growers and this is the best strain. We're the OGs, and we come from years of in Humboldt and you can kind of command this premiumness." But I think that as consumers become more accustomed to weed, it gets more commoditized, unfortunately. And I think through that, we need to find other ways of distinction. And I think, when you look at sustainability and you look at why would someone return this device back to the store for either a credit or whatever, I think there's some people that are motivated for a financial scheme and trying to figure out like what that price point is. We're trying to see what value needs to be clicked on it. But I also think that there's people that actually do just simply care. But then I also think that there's the ego-driven consumer that says, "Hey, you know what? Like, I want to be known as a good person."
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
I'm going to put it on my social media that I return this device or that I use. We call it the Toyota Prius effect. The Toyota Prius is one of the ugliest cars on the planet. But you know what? Toyota made it ugly because people who bought a Prius, people knew that they were driving a hybrid.
Right. Yeah.
When Chevy came out with a hybrid car that looked like a regular car, no one knew that it was a hybrid. So they didn't get that prestige value of being like, "Oh, hey, look at me.
Yeah.
I'm a good person because I care about the planet and I'm and I'm burning less gap or creating less emissions than you that's driving this regular car." So I think there's a lot of different motivations out there. Again, like I said, someone needed to create this product in order for the program to be modeled out.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Without the product, you don't have a program. So it goes back to the same thing I talked about earlier. It's like you've got to have the back end and the front end to coexist.
Yeah.
So, I've been excited that we've had a lot of people reach out to us. There's been a lot of groups that have said, "Hey, you know what? We love what you're doing. We don't understand it. We want to learn more." We've got several customers today that we're working with that are vertically integrated in smaller markets that we think are going to be fantastic pilots for us. These vertical guys that obviously do their manufacturing and their retailing, it's super easy for them. And like when we sat and showed them, it was like guys, like all you have to do is put in receptacle bins in your store, take them back to your facility. It requires you just saw me do it. There's no commercial equipment. We made it like Legos. It's like changing a light bulb. If you can't change a light bulb, then you probably won't be able to do this. If you can, then you probably figure it out, and it takes like 15 seconds manually.
Right.
We can, we can repurpose these devices like they should be.
Yeah.
In my perfect world, if this gets bigger, if you think about, the Trump effect, whatever, Like, it, there's policies that I agree on.
Yeah.
And, bringing jobs back, like, you know what? This is a way that we can reduce our dependence on foreign manufacturing
Yeah.
by repurposing these devices.
Absolutely. Man, that makes so much
creating
sense.
local jobs to collect and reassemble these, put them back on the market. And things like this, which are very simple, through, automated mold injection. I know in packaging companies already, like there's U.S. plastic mold injection companies that can compete with China and other countries because we're no longer having to ship these products overseas and boat them and air freight them. So, there's less emissions and we can actually make these devices in America.
Nice.
So, to me, there's a really big picture here, and we're in love with what we're trying to do. We've dreamed of this for a long time, and we're excited because we think that we're closer to seeing our dream become a reality.
Yeah, I think so, man. The history and the lead up to it, and just knowing where your heart's at when it comes to solving issues, solving problems, right? When greed doesn't necessarily affect it, everyone loves to make money. There's nothing wrong with that. And greed is needed in certain cases. But, when you back it with, we want a product that works, that the consumer can trust, that our partners can trust, and then add in sustainability, it just makes sense. And that's why I love it. I've loved everything about Aveo. Obviously, Keith is an incredible individual. It's hard not to like him, right? But at the same time, it's you all share that ethos of support, sustainability, wanting to do better and make the industry better. And we can see that the impact that there will be outside of the cannabis industry. But it's just awesome. I love everything about it. I love the story, Jonathan. We're gonna let you get to bed. Maybe you probably have about 1 million emails to catch up on, but. We appreciate you sharing your story. It's one for the books, that's for sure. And we thank you for being on Legacies, man. Thanks for making the time.
No, we certainly appreciate and the timing was perfect for us. We love. I think that when you're passionate about what you do and you're excited about what you do and you're as close to the product as we are, and we see the potential impact that it can have, it's hard for us to not want to talk about it. So I appreciate giving us the opportunity and platform to do that.
Yeah, well, you're very welcome, and you're welcome back anytime when you've rested up. I still don't know how you do it, and I understand why you burnt out, man. I mean, it makes sense. You've got a lot on the go, but we're glad we were able to connect. Sorry about your luck, MJ BizCon. You didn't get Jonathan and Keith there this year, but that's okay. We got you. So we appreciate you, man. Keep up the good work, continued success. We're here to support any way we can.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Wes.
Breadstack e-commerce. It might be time to upgrade.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. We're joined by Aaron Anderson of Tricanna Industries. Aaron, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. It's a beautiful sunny day if you can't see.
I know, making me jealous.
Well, it's still cold out there, but whatever. Okay. I take the vitamin D any day.
Yeah, no doubt. It's funny, every time I say, are you a Seinfeld fan?
I am, yeah.
Okay, so every time I say Tricanna, I think Crimerica Industries for some reason.
Oh, no.
I don't know. Every time I'm like, Tricanna will come up on LinkedIn or wherever or something, and I'm like, Crimerica.
There you go. I should put that in some of my pitches, maybe.
There you go. Well, listen, we appreciate you joining us on Legacies. We've been talking about this for a while. We're glad we made it happen because you are not new to the cannabis industry by any means. Nope. If there's any individual that I speak with and find most intriguing, it's you and your long history with the battle of this plant. That's for sure. We want to understand Tricanna and what Tricanna is doing, but I really want to share your history, which is very deep rooted and goes generationally into the cannabis industry. How far back do you want to take us?
I mean,
let's go.
How far back do you want to go? I mean,
let's go. I mean,
officially,
first experience.
I'm second generation.
Second gen. There we go. So let's start with that, because your introduction to the plant and cannabis and the scene itself. I mean, what age? Jeez.
Well, I actually probably have a picture somewhere around my house here of my parents holding me as a baby. I was born to a 19-year-old mother, and in that picture is a giant cannabis plant hiding behind them. But
I've got it. You
it's just-
shared it. I'll get it with Wes so he can put it up on screen.
Yeah, it's a 70s photo though, so you have to really know what you're looking for, right? And that would have been back in those days where you could plant a plant in your parents' garden and they don't even notice, right? Because they don't even know what it is yet.
Yeah.
So that was my dad's field and garden at his mom's house. And anyways, that's where it started. So I always say it's in my DNA because, you know, I was normalized by it. My parents, especially my father, consumed it regularly. And, you know, when you grow up around it, it's kind of, you think, you know, life is normal, right? You're a kid.
So let me pause on that for a second and ask you that, because growing up around it, I mean, when you have the influence of your parents that are openly accepting of cannabis, you know, and it's a young, impressionable age, right? And then, you know, you start to grow up and you develop the sense of the outer world and what's going on and the harshness against cannabis. Was that a weird experience for you? Because I mean, it would have been ingrained, like you say, it's part of your DNA, like cannabis good, right?
I mean, it was normal. So like chaos is normal to me. And I was first born on a 30-acre farm, you know, and then I started the farm kid and then moved to the small town in the Kootenays when I was 8, and then moved to the island in Victoria when I was 12, which is when I eventually became a young adult and got into my own cannabis adventures. But like going from that farm all the way slowly to now living in Vancouver, you know, experiencing all levels of society, I guess. By the time I was a teenager, like I had already made my own decisions, and like my mom used to give me bags of weed to try to convince me to not go to the bootlegger when I go to parties as a teenager, because it was safer, right? You know,
Sure, absolutely.
You know, I'd rather you get high, don't drink, kind of thing. So, you know, so that was normal for me. Obviously, I knew by the time I was a teenager what laws are and stuff like that. But I made my decision on what. And truth be told, as a teenager, experimenting with both sides. I mean, you smoke cannabis when you're 16, you have fun, you giggle with your friends. You drink booze when you're 16, you don't know what you're doing. You end up puking everywhere, and whatever else happens, and you got a hangover the last 2 days. You don't get that with cannabis, right?
Yeah.
So you learn as a youth what is being told to you and what you're experiencing, and what, you know, you make up your own mind.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But I mean, completely different region, right? Like, you know, it seems, at least from my experience of individuals, and this is even growing up, you know, starting very young, it was just more accepted in BC than especially Ontario. I mean, Ontario was like, you know, task force after task force. We're going to crack down on the cannabis cultivation and distribution. It was just horrible. Whereas, and don't get me wrong, because I know the stories, like Kevy is, you know, from Kootenay's Finest, has shared his experience with, what do they call it? The Green Raiders or whatever it was, with the helicopters coming in and, you know, hiding under logs, or, you know, so I get it, but it seems socially, at least, it was just more acceptable, I think, you know, it's just the whole BC bud, right? Like,
oh yeah. I mean, I got so normalized to it in my young adult that when I made the decision to move to Halifax, for instance,
yeah,
I was like confused when I'd offer, you know, peers at the same age, and they're like, I don't smoke that. Like, for real? You don't?
yeah,
Who doesn't smoke weed?
yeah.
So that took
Well, they only had
a little
hash.
bit of learning.
There was only hash going around in the Maritimes
right.
those
There's
days.
that too, right?
Yeah. But I mean, your experience though, because you know the long arm of the law obviously has played its role within your life, and you know the influence and how you would have to navigate this crazy industry. But you know, and how long did you spend in Halifax or in the Maritimes? Like,
That was just for 2 years. I was in a transition. That was in between two busts, so to speak. So
Okay.
also, when you're young, you think Big Brother knows it all, which is how I learned Big Brother doesn't know it all. But I was in the midst of a year and a half conditional sentencing. And so I thought Big Brother might appreciate if I transitioned to school out east and followed my girlfriend at the time.
Okay.
That ended up being a colossal nightmare and a complete misunderstanding of how the world works. But it was interesting for sure. So I did 2 years out there, experienced a hurricane. I experienced a lot of interesting weather patterns, and found the last place in Canada that was still selling $3,000 pounds of wheat.
Yes, 3,000, man. Like, and what year was that?
Early 2000s. Early 2000s.
Jeez, I was gonna say, like, you
So,
didn't like even after my days with MMAR, like, you're lucky at 24,
yeah.
25, somewhere in there. Now, if it was going to the East Coast, you could get a little more because they were, and you would probably know this more than anyone, that made its way down into the US quite easily from the maritime region.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I was a college kid at the time, so I was just taking advantage of the local market. It took a little bit because all of Canada is used to like eighths, ounces, quarters,
Yeah.
QPs, etc. And they're like 10 grams, 50 grams, 100 grams, and like try to do like math in the backseat of a car,
What
like
the hell?
by the pennies. Like, I'll sell you this for, $7.12 a gram. Wait a minute, was that good? So that took a little bit to figure out.
Hold on, I've never heard that before. They were selling it.
They're metric there, yeah. Their domestic
What?
market's totally metric, and they don't buy
Oh my
ounces.
God.
They buy 10 grams, 20 grams, 50 grams, 100 grams. That's how they think, right? And I'm like
Oh my
shipping it from
God.
BC at the, per pound, and trying to like think, okay. And
Yeah.
we didn't have smartphones then. So like,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's one thing we got really good at is how to divide 7.
yeah.
7, 14, 28. Okay, we can keep going, guys. Let's go. Right.
Right.
But then it introduced the metric system. Yeah. But I mean, that prepped you just for, operating in the legal side of the industry. Cause now
Totally.
that was tough. That was tough. I'll say that was the toughest thing for me. When I joined Ample, everything in the time, it was grams and kilograms. And I'm like,
Yep.
what's that in, like, how do you define that out by 7? I don't get
Yeah.
it. Right. And I still
Yeah.
remember the early days of, when hydro made its way into Ontario. Like, God, I think I was 17, 18. They were selling like a gram. It was a gram in tinfoil. And it was like 10 to 12 bucks. And I'm like, 12? What? Like 12? Like, and there's $2 bills at the time. Paper.
Yeah.
Paper for the audience that doesn't understand what paper $2 bills are. But what a wild time. And so weed wasn't really prevalent though in the Maritimes around that time though, was it? Like, it was still quite dominated by hash.
Yeah. So, and I had obviously a lot of contacts in British Columbia, and I learned really quickly. Like, I got so accustomed to BC, where like, if you wanted to do a good job or make good money, you just go rent a house and do it yourself. But there,
Yeah.
like, it was a lot more territorial, and I was stepping on toes. So I had to like layer myself with a lot more middlemen and do like clandestine deals where you're hanging out at the pub and watching your partners do the transaction,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
to speak, and just like keep yourself at arm's length away from other large scale participants who are a little peeved at the market share they're losing.
Yeah.
So that was a learning for me, because I'm really like, I had the luxury when I was in BC before my first bus where like 65% of my family was involved. So being able to work with your mom, your dad, your brother, your cousins, your aunts, your uncles, whatever, like trust was easy, right? Like,
Yeah.
here's a 100 grand worth of weed, see you in a day, whatever, no big deal, right? So, took that kind of for granted, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. No, it does make sense. It makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, I'm thinking, back in 16, 17, looking for those hookups, because we wanted to bring BC weed in. So I'm just thinking you expat from BC lands in Halley, and now you've got access to, like, you're the hookup. You've got access to BC weed. Which in other cases, I know the markups were crazy in some of those days.
Yeah, they were.
But you would have been the go-to guy at that time, but also stepping on some toes, as you say.
Yeah, and it was all an accident because I had a 6 o'clock curfew, and I was in college, and I'm in my early 20s, almost mid 20s, and so I tricked my accounting group to come to my house to do a project that was due, when they used to do like group project. And I got a 6 o'clock curfew. So anyways, we're doing a group project, and in storm two parole officers with their badges around their neck, and they start interrogating everybody. And so that caused, like, what the fuck is going on with Aaron at school? Yeah. And then 2 days later, it's like, can you get me some weed? Can you get me some weed? Can you get me some BC bud?
It's the best thing that ever happened to Aaron.
Right. And so I used my my student loan and brought in some pounds. The first couple pounds took 3 weeks to sell, and then all of a sudden it was like 50 pounds a month, and it just,
Jesus.
Yeah.
Wow. Hungry college kids out in Halifax.
Definitely.
Well, you could have sold stacks on the side. I'm sure you would have cleaned up. But I mean, that would have painted the picture of, oh, Aaron's got connections, but also don't fuck with Aaron, because he's got parole officers breathing down his neck. God knows what he's been into.
Yeah, it was an interesting time. It was right at the end of that year and a half. It was just tailing out. So I got into it about the last 3 months of my parole, and then I got arrested about 4 or 5 months after I had serviced my parole. Yeah. So that was entertaining.
Yeah, I bet. So fast forward from there a little bit. I mean, I think you had gone back to BC, right? At that point?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so the learnings there was, I just was finishing my marketing diploma. I was in my last 2 weeks where you're supposed to do your work portion. Yeah. And I was busy getting arrested and stuff. So I had to actually forge my work side of the things in order to just kind of deal with life and get my diploma finished. Yeah. And so as a result, because it was so close, and Halifax is not BC, so they were looking for time at the time. And we're talking, it was a 6-pound shipment that had come in that got caught by them, and so they dressed like UPS and came and did the delivery and then lifted up their shirt. We're like, and they stormed, right? God. So as a result, I used the free lawyers that you get access to, went through all of my information, and then I contacted the lawyer that actually helped get my mom off, because in 1997 my mom was arrested for a grow in Victoria. Yeah. And that lawyer that she hired, it took about 2 years and he got her off scot-free. Wow. So I contacted that guy and was like, hey, I'm in a bind. And he looked at all of the stuff and recommended that I bring it to British Columbia. Something I learned back then was if you're willing to plead guilty, you can pick any judge in the country. Okay. Wow. So come running back to BC, where it's a little more friendly with these types of the situations, plead guilty before a judge of his choice. Might have had to do a few more deals to Halifax to pay for his bill. Yeah. And then, long story short, he slipped it through the system, and I got my first offense.
Wild. That's wild.
So that would end up being 9 months of conditional sentencing, but
geez,
it only had a 9 o'clock curfew, and my parole officer was like the same age as me and gorgeous, so I had a lot of fun with her.
So like that's crazy. It just shows the acceptance level though too, right? Like, because if you dude, you would have been screwed if you had pled guilty in Halifax.
Oh, there's no way I was facing time. They were like, I was looking at a year minimum, this is 2004 maybe. So, and I just finished school. So I came running back. I managed to get a job with a brewery, which is how I started getting into the alcohol CPG. And then, that whole process, that was sketch, right? Like I was at like the lowest point. I was down to my last $3,000. I don't have a job. I don't have a home. I'm couch surfing at every BC friend of mine I could find, trying to like use my marketing diploma to get me a job. So I can, by the time I'm in front of a judge, I'm like, do you want to waste taxpayers' money or let this guy like just kind of make amends? Right.
Right.
So, you know, it all worked out in the end. And then I ended up in alcohol for a decade and a half. And, you know, I stayed away from scale at that point. Like I small time, like peanuts, like at that after for about, you know, a few more years for sure, but nothing worth bothering, you know, just enough to kind of help pay the bills.
Yeah. No, I get that. I know that one. So did you land your role within BevAlc because of marketing? That's what you originally joined with, was in a
like
marketing role?
And I just was like, I applied for like 10 jobs a day and was just like marketing, figured out. And so I got to this brewery, but like literally I was trying to find a home at the same time. Like I said, I was down to my last $3,000. So like, the job offer was for 35 and I sold myself for 24 just to like get me out of hell.
Yeah. Wow.
So they couldn't resist. They took me at 24.
Yeah.
You know, and I stayed with them for 3.5 years and just like started learning, you know, that was my first real job when I started finally, my resume was finally telling the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, but okay. So, I mean, you pick up a lot of experience within CPG, right? BevAlc, I mean, if you want experience, CPG, you're going to get it in BevAlc, right? Like,
oh yeah.
I don't know if there's any other, I mean, Rubbermaid and Walmart, maybe, I don't know, you know, it always comes to mind, especially in the world of marketing, but, yeah, like there's always the argument, right? You know, cannabis isn't CPG. Cannabis is CPG. You can't treat it like CPG, right? And you've worked both sides very closely. You know, another individual that comes to mind would be like Jonathan Wilson, right? He many years in the BevAlc space. You know, he can speak it off. Where do you stand on that? Is cannabis CPG?
Oh, it's definitely CPG, and the liquor boards are actually getting a little more like pushing, you know, operators towards it, and their patience with inability to maintain it is wearing thin at this point. I would say 2025 is going to see a bit of an awakening when it comes to supply and demand, because all the major boards are stepping up their expectations around getting your CPG in order. And if you don't have it in order, it's like too bad.
Dead. You're dead. I mean, that's, and the writing's been on the wall for a while, I think. I mean, we've seen the mishaps within the industry. You know, we've talked about this before, right? Is, you know, can you fulfill your POs? Can you keep up with that? Is it going to be general listing? Is it going to be flow through? And then, you know, there's a lot of craziness that happens. But so at what point in time, so you spend 15 years in BevAlc, was it right at the time when legalization was happening? I can't recall when it was that you decided, you know what, I'm going to go over into cannabis and figure this out.
So, I mean, my mind's a little fuzzy, but I'm going to call it 2005-ish when I got my first alcohol job. So when, you know, I actually voted for Justin Trudeau, you know, when he didn't exist yet and he was promising to legalize weed.
So did I. Yeah, I'll say it back then.
Every politician I've ever voted for has never won. So so I voted for him. He actually won. And then he was starting to follow through. And at the time I was working for Parallel 49, and we were like I joined them when they were 6 months old. They had 6 50-hect tanks. And by the time I left 5 years later, we were 3/4 of a city block with a restaurant and 28 100-hect tanks and 4 400-hect tanks. So I really went through this like massive growth spurt with them. And that's where I ended up going from being a territory manager to an actual manager and actually working with the liquor boards and starting to really understand how they function. And gaining that experience. And so, to be honest, I was trying to motivate them to invest in cannabis. I'm like, this is right around the corner, man. We're going to own booze and weed. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And they were just like, hell no, that's way too much work and money, etc. So by fluke, I was actually at the P&E doing a team event with my team and getting loser drunk with and doing all the rides and what have you.
Loser drunk.
Right. And I ran into an old friend who was working for, an LP at the time, and he's like, you should come and check out what we're up to. So I followed up, and to be honest with you, at that point, like, they're going to legalize weed. I spent the mid 90s and early 2000s doing it illicitly. I got out of it because I'm just maturing, and I don't want to keep like facing a judge. I'd faced a judge twice. I played whack-a-mole with grow ops so many times. Like, I've actually been raided and gotten away with it a few times, and like literally like handcuffs sitting in my living room while they're going through everything. But I happened to get a 24-hour notice and managed to like skirt out of there, an hour before they show up. And so, I don't want to play that game anymore, but if we're going to legalize it, like, they're not legalizing it without me. Fuck no. So I basically followed up with that gentleman, went to check out the LP. And of course I was, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. I didn't know what was what. And they were definitely running both the LP and an ACMPR at the time. But I didn't even know what ACMPR meant, or MMAR, or whatever the fuck the acronym is. I was out of the loop by then that, I toured the place, and it looked so professional and what have you, that I just wanted a piece of it. I wanted in. So I figured out how to position myself, get a job. I did the same thing I did with the other. I took a massive haircut on my pay at the time just to get in, right?
Yeah.
And then that was like pre-legalization. So that would have been November 2017. So we know Justin Trudeau is going to do it. We don't have a rough draft of the regs. British Columbia's got this assumption that all these people are going to just get grandfathered in. But like, as someone who's been through the system and worked with liquor boards, I definitely knew that it was going to be a reset.
Yeah.
And whatever was the past doesn't matter. This is a full reset. And everybody was like, oh no, they're going to grandfather me. Like, I wouldn't. There
was
bet
a lot
on
of
that.
high hopes, man, in those days. I remember I was around a lot of those MMARs that transitioned to the ACMPR, and no, not happening. No.
So I just like, and as you remember back then, like, it was all about, like, everybody was speculating, right? So at the end of the day, like, it was all about self-education, because ultimately you couldn't go to school for this. You couldn't. Even lawyers were guessing at that point, like literally just. So whenever a drop of information came, I got it, I printed it, I sat through and I read it all and made my own notes and my own interpretations, and deliberated with all of the intelligent minds that exist in this industry today. A lot of them were on LinkedIn or Twitter at the time, and, available for chatter, because we're all like sponging off each other, the ones that were like really taking it to the next level. And then, of course, the LP that I worked with, because they were playing both sides of the fence, they, didn't get to keep their license 3 weeks before legalization. So I got to experience what happens when Health Canada is really frustrated with you.
Yeah, Jesus. So what they were in full operation at the time, right?
Oh yeah.
Like, and so what? Because I had heard of some of them, and I won't name names necessarily, maybe another episode, but I do recall that, and it was it's shut down, destruction of plant material, everything. Like, is that what happened with this one?
Oh, that was an entertaining day. I mean, first of all, that morning, my lovely wife at the time had actually boarded an airplane to fly to Toronto and unplug her father from leukemia. So that was like, and then second of all, we were a pubco, and I was doing investment relations a little bit at the time. So I was drinking my own Kool-Aid and pushing this narrative and raising all these funds. And so unknown to her, I had moved all of our money, my daughter's money and our RSPs, you name it, into our company. Yeah. And I was rich for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then I drove to work that day because we were all supposed to meet with CBC and do a media event. And of course, I show up early, and there's RCMP everywhere. And so obviously I'm texting.
Talk about PTSD and flashbacks.
Right.
Oh my God.
Like, fuck, here we go, right? So, we shut down the media thing and whatever. And then I get through that, and then of course we end up with a suspension, and we're all advised that we're not to sell our shares because we have insider knowledge and all that stuff. So I got to watch my personal net worth drop, and I managed to keep 20% of it.
Man.
So, and then I actually hid that from my wife because, you know, on legalization day, I was actually at her parents' home watching Bruce Linton on TV make it the first legal purchase in Canada.
Mhm.
And I had just finished being a pallbearer. So that was like an epic
God.
day. But long story short, what it did though is like I'm a fighter. So there's no way I was going to go down. There's no way I was going to explain to my wife I lost everything. I had to figure this out. So I worked really hard. I will call out one name, David Brown. He's an awesome character in this industry,
Yeah.
and he was hosting an event to help micros figure out how to integrate. And
Yeah.
at that time, he invited the entire head of Health Canada, and they actually attended.
Okay.
And so I went because I was concerned about my connection to that former. Now I had nothing directly to do with it, but I was just paranoid.
Yeah.
So I went and I met with them, and during the lunch break, I went straight to the heads of Health Canada, identified who I was, what we had been up to, and was like, I want a future in this. And they were like, we do not care. Like, as long as you haven't done anything in the last like couple of years, we just don't care. Don't worry about it. So that
Wow.
was like the peace of mind I needed. And then, you know, just continued persevering from there.
Yeah. Wow, man. That's what we could end it there and have enough to you know, break out and cover for the next year. But so after that, and what year was that? Was 2018? 2018. Yeah.
Yeah, it was the end of 2018, just the beginning of about almost the beginning of 2019, somewhere in there.
Yeah, it would have to be because I remember the Bruce
Yeah.
Linton announcement and the way that was playing out, and he made out like a bandit, and you know.
Yeah, because it took me about 4 months to so I stayed employed at the place while they were lost their license. They were dreaming that they were going to get their license back any minute now, but Bonify had just lost their license too, right? And
Okay.
and then Raven Quest, if I'll throw a few
RavenQuest,
names
yeah,
out,
yeah.
if you remember, we were not the only getting spanked at the time. So I had enough anecdotal information out there to start making observations on what you may or may not, I was trying to elongate time, if you can imagine, because
Right.
if you imagine just the process of getting licensed, there was getting your license, and then there was getting the sales amendment.
Mm.
And as a sales guy, I'm like, how come some LPs are getting sales amendments in 15 months and some are getting them in 4 months?
Right.
And I was really digging into that, trying to figure out what is it about this one versus that one that's making that disconnect.
And what was it? Because we always wondered ourselves, and it's one of the areas I never dug into.
Man,
I'm
it
like,
was so many reasons. So one of the
I's
reasons,
dotted and T's crossed, but
one of the reasons is just misunderstanding the words and the regulations. So batch and lot, right?
Oh,
So
fuck. Oh my God,
so-
that's it. I'm done. PTSD, done.
confusing batch and lot. So a lot of LPs thought that they actually had to grow two batches of cannabis first, and then package that and submit to Health Canada that they're ready. And then at the time you had to do two. So I always confuse lots and batches too, but you had to do 2 lots, I think, of. So what that meant was one pre-roll and 1/8 maybe or something.
Right. Okay, that makes total sense now. So the way that we did it, because Ample, when we developed the technology for it, right? So we always referred to everything batch was living, right? Even though we still got it. After it was harvested and dried, now it became a potentially saleable product. That became the lot. So the lot in which you would work. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm still going through this stuff. But you're right. 'Cause I remember those days of, we would instruct, not myself, but our sales team, as they were onboarding customers, it would be, okay, you're going to get your sales license. You need, because we were told, hell, I don't even know, it might've been David Hyde, or Elkin and team at the time, but you got to produce 2 batches, prove that you can do it, get it to a saleable format. and then submit for your, and you're going, no. So all these customers worry, because I'll tell you, the bill went up a little bit when they had their sales license for us.
Oh yeah, but then that just stretched out time. So a few things was, when you made the application, it would take them 3 to 6 months, Health Canada, to even acknowledge you.
Right.
B, it's like a driver's license. If you fail, you can't apply again for 6 more months.
Right. Okay.
So some of those 15-monthers were failing.
Right.
And then the 4-monthers, what they were doing was they were like, okay, how's a standalone processor grow 2 batches?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, you just had to obtain some biomass, and it's not up to Health Canada to know your scale. So you don't need to have 50 people running around making 10,000 units. You can have 2 people smoking cigarettes and taking all day to weigh out 5 things. Right. And then that would still qualify, because it wasn't about scale. It wasn't, and people were just misconfusing all of that and being like, they've got all hands on deck. They're wasting 100 kilos, pumping out and showing Health Canada. And it's like, they just want to see records and see that your label is compliant, your G-tins are in order, like really simple stuff, actually. And
well, you say it's simple now, but I mean, in those days, it was a lot of confusion, but you seem to have cracked the code somehow.
Well, I did it through osmosis, just like literally. So I joined an agency at the time. So 2019, my early days, I was going under the hood of every LP, and I've toured over almost 90 of these things.
Wow.
And so, I would go into some of them, and I'm not going to out them, but like some of them didn't even know they needed a salesman. They're like, I met with the liquor board and they won't take my product. What the F is going on? And I'm like, well, you don't have a salesman. And then I spent like the next 2 hours educating them on what to do. And like, they've got all these consultants around and they don't even know what they're doing. So I'm like selling their shares in the parking lot. Like, what?
Yeah, that one's done. Man, 90, that's crazy. I'd been in my fair share, but there was times I'd come back and I'd share it with Wes even. I'm like, yeah, they're not going to make it. They're just, right? Especially coming from an operations person in manufacturing, I'm going, oh my God, they are so inefficient. It's not even funny. There is no possible way they will be profitable in the next 5 years, let alone 1.
Yeah. So So that was the so what I learned is everybody's living in their own silo, as you can imagine, because they've got, and they're not actually exposing themselves to each other because they're all scared of each other. And I'm actually invited into everybody's house, and I got to see the different versions of everybody's version of compliance. I got to see Fort Knox to like minimum viable product and everything in between. And I went to one LP that like was literally a house with walls around the house that were built like 20 feet tall, just giant fences. It was obviously an MMAR or whatever.
Yeah. Was it Derek Pedro's by any chance? Is that the one that became American? No.
And so they had 2 dirty lab coats and like 2 hair nets, and we went into what would have been the dining room, and I was ducking it and trying not to hit lights, and it felt like the old days, and it was all white poly and tuck tape.
Black and white, yeah.
Right? And then we went past the hot water tank and went up the stairs to see the cloning area and stuff, and I'm like, this dude has a license.
Yeah.
All these other people are building Fort Knox. They're spending whatever hundreds of millions, and like, when I left that, I looked at the guy I was with, who was our VP of cultivation at the time. And I'm like, if this was the old days, we would have been shot in the bathroom.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, good thing we wire money now, right?
Yeah. Jesus. Well, I mean, that's like, it wasn't just one. There was multiple of those, right? The original T-God facility. Marican, right? What it became, the hoop house, and it blew down in the storms multiple times. Like there was, and I would say the same thing. I'm like, my grow is better than this. Like it's, we took over 100 by 200 foot drive shed and completely converted it. But like, I'm thinking, you're right. Like it just didn't make any sense. I think was the hard part for the vast majority of us to understand at that time was you've got Aurora building the biggest vault you've ever seen. And yet on the flip side of that, you've got, as you just explained, there's literally poly, the black and white that we'd use for our little shed grow rooms, and they had a license. Like,
Yeah.
it just blew my mind.
Yeah. And so I just smart enough to put two and two together. And so at that time I was working for a future large LP. It didn't even have a license yet. But and I was just bringing home all that data and just being like, okay, our consultants are wrong, so fire them. And then argue with our in-house legal all the time because like you are misinterpreting everything.
Yeah.
So it was fun. I won't lie, it was super fun to like learn all that stuff because again, you can't go to like when my daughter, she's 9 right now.
Yeah.
When she goes to university, there'll actually be courses for this.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, and it took some time, Purcell and forming up over at Kwantlen Poly, right? Like I helped with their QA course. I instructed that course for quite some time, but that was years in the making, right? It wasn't, and like you said, so Niagara has their program and, Bill McDonald's done a great job over there, but imagine where that's going to be when your daughter is attending university, right?
I know.
Like this is going to be night and day. So don't use black and white poly. We don't use that anymore. But yeah, you're right. There was no, God, I mean, even our internal at Ample, you could imagine, especially around data, like we had our internal legal teams and I'd be like, no, there's just no way. We can't do it that way. We can't do things that we're never going to be able to make it if we have to go by every letter of that law. It doesn't make sense.
No. Well, the other challenge that was adding that time decay was people doing things linear, like one thing at a time.
Right.
When there was actually a lot of things you could do at the same time and just kind of speed up that process.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I mean, just to toot my own horn, but like, so I'll use names that don't exist anymore, but our friends at Shelter at the time, they educated me on an opportunity that I took and ran, but they figured out how to borrow somebody else's license to basically drop ship. And the only reason I didn't work with them was because we wanted to do vapes and whatnot, and they only had flower at the time, flower and pre-rolls.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I would have like honed in on him. But the CEO at the time, he I met with him and he kind of like laid out how he solved that puzzle. I brought it to our CEO and legal team and was like, this is a thing. And then, Trina Fraser, she drops little dollops on Twitter every now and then. She actually tweeted it was a thing. And I screen capped it and sent it to both of them. I was like, I'm telling you, this is a thing.
Yeah.
And we ended up interviewing a couple dozen LPs to figure out who would be our dance partner. And by the end of 2019, we had gotten into multiple markets and sold top line $4.3 million. And we still have a sales license.
Wow. That's crazy. And Trina, by the way, was invaluable in those early days, even without retaining, just as you say, those little tidbits of information she would put out. Invaluable.
Massive
So,
at the time.
So you're doing 4.3, is that what you said, with no sales license?
3 million top line that last quarter of 2019, and we still did not have a sales license.
Wow. Did they close that loophole?
I think they just expedited getting a sales amendment, so you don't have to be so, And at the time, British Columbia, our backyard, wouldn't let us do it. They were like, no, we don't see this as true. So we could only get in every province except for them.
Oh man.
And then eventually we got our sales license. We got it 3 days before Christmas. But then, then Alberta's got its process. It takes almost a year to go through, and like all the MOUs you have to get with every province. So like it took about 9 more months to take our license and unhinge everything from the other license back onto ourselves and get going, right?
Jeez. So where and when do you end up at Tricanna then?
Last year, September is when I made the change. And so Tricanna is a smaller group of individuals here based in Mission, BC. We have a small group of brands, and we work with a lot of small and mid-level LPs, but we do actually a lot of B2B business, especially in the pre-roll category. And we're just starting to expand into the infused pre-rolls. We do work with one of the top 10 LPs on pre-rolls, and we crush, 100 kilos a week or so on their behalf.
Wow.
So like under the hood, we're actually in all of the markets, but outwardly we have these small breadth of brands that do a very tepid amount of success. But over 35% of our P&L is behind the scenes B2B business right now, and it's growing quite substantially.
Yeah. Where do you see the most opportunity? I think that's one of the things that I really loved about learning with Tricanna in the early time, for me, at least, my exposure to you and our outreach and conversations. But you guys are doing it smart. Like you're not big and boisterous. You're not out there saying we're the best at anything. You are treating your brand partners properly. You're gaining distribution. Like you said, I mean, crushing 100 kilos, that's not a small feat either, man. Like that's pretty good.
That's a lot of pre-rolls.
That's a lot of pre-rolls. But what do you see as the opportunities moving forward? Because you bring a lot of experience, obviously, the Tricanna and team. Like there's some great minds there, but where's the opportunity next? We had touched on this when you and David and I had connected, but infused pre-rolls. And I think I had shared my fear of the future, which is, will craft flower even exist? And that, like, will my daughter's generation and those generations to come even get to know what, OG craft flower is? Yeah. Like,
I mean, the world is changing, and that is definitely true. Flower is definitely, it's in this zone where it's still by itself the most dominant, but it is not gaining market share. Right. Other segments are gaining market share. Convenience is definitely here to stay, and convenience in all forms, really. And like when you look at category growth, flower is in this weird zone right now where by dollars it's actually selling the same every month. It doesn't move, but it's slowly compressing market share because all of the other categories are growing. So in percentage terms it's shrinking, but when absolute dollars it's actually stagnant. So it means like the people who love flower and here to stay, and they love flower. They're not motivated by other forms, but new customers, new users are looking to other levels of convenience, and are not people like you and me who ran around and slept under grow tables because all of your power is wired to, and it's February and you're like, shit,
don't run the microwave. Don't run the microwave. Shit, it's out again.
Oh man,
damn it.
I literally slept a whole winter under my grow tables one year and moved the PlayStation and everything down there because I wired the whole house to the basement and it's stealing
all the power,
freezing.
But also it felt real good just being in the room, right? Like it was tropical, and the plants have energy. It was a great vibe.
It was a great vibe for sure.
But I'd like to give your insight on what's going on in this craziness, because we talk about supply and demand, and obviously you pay a lot of attention to this. Outside of, we won't necessarily even move into data deal stuff today. We'll just stay on topic with, there was a huge amount of overstock. We'll call it overstock of cannabis flower. And that was driving. I mean, was it more perception that, hey, we've got a ton of cannabis in Canada, so it just naturally drove the price per gram in wholesale down? And then all of a sudden we go through, okay, we're flushing the toilet. We got to get rid of all the old shit. No one wants it. But now there's this rise again where flower seems to be, better than I, is in high demand again. Walk us through what's causing all of that craziness.
Well, I mean, so without pissing anyone off, the entire process is
piss people off.
Well, the easiest in this entire process is actually the growing. All the other components are more complicated. And I'm not saying growing is easy, but like,
but
in the early days,
the simplicity of it over, gaining distribution and the marketing and ensuring sell through and analyzing the data.
So the early days, if you think like day one legalization, there was 17 stores nationwide British Columbia, like, literally said, we're extending legalization 6 more months because we're doing municipal voting here. We don't have time for this. And as you know, that means they're not even going to accept an application for 6 more months. And I'm like mathing all this out. I'm like, these guys are growing enough to supply Mars, and there's 17 stores to put it into.
Right.
And then you've got this falsified supply and demand because people don't have sales amendments yet and stuff like that. And then you've got these middlemen gatekeepers with their open and closed procurement systems, which also play a key role in how supply and demand truly works. And so at the hot minute back then, you had my accountants at my former employer actually did the math on all the canopy. And at the time, we had 9 times sales in canopy versus run rates of sales.
Jeez.
So obviously a lot of that had to go. And so it slowly consolidated and moved into, relationships and partnerships, like contract grows and stuff like that. And they consolidated and what have you. We're still around like 4 to 5 times canopy to sales. Now, obviously some is now like exporting and stuff like that. So you can't just paint that brush. But there's a misunderstanding on one quagmire, and that comes down to MSRP. The consumer still has the opportunity to change their mind and go back to the black market at any day they wish, even a new user. And so if we elevate the MSRP too high, the consumer has that opportunity to say, fuck it, I'm just going to Google and go on this one. I'll buy better price, same good weed. So that challenge means that we can't push our luck and just start like, you know what, supply and demand says I can sell $300 ounces now. It's not going to happen. So with that being said, there's still a ceiling on MSRP, and then you have to reverse engineer that from the retailer through the liquor board, through the excise tax and so on. And you've only got this much wiggle room. And then that comes down to producers figuring out their cogs and whatnot to save on those nickels and dimes. So yes, the cost of per flower is going up perceptually because it went to such rock bottom.
Right.
That, but there's still a ceiling because, I meet with liquor boards all the time. I pitched 13 products to a liquor board recently. I had an uncomfortable conversation with them, but they're not wrong in their statements. And so they're isolating me into a certain group of categories. I threw a good, better, best plan at them. They're like, we like your good, sort of like your better. We're not having your best. So what does that mean? It means when I learn on Monday what won, I'm turning to my suppliers. I'm like, I'm really sorry, bro. Like, this is my new ceiling. Like, I know you want this. I'm here. Yeah. If you want to sell it, I'm here. If you don't want to sell it, great. Have a great day. There's nothing I can do.
Jeez.
So that plays a key role into pricing.
Yeah. But do you think is it still based on, because I hear, obviously we have a ton of different conversations and this is outside the podcast, right? And it's certain brands are struggling right now because they can't source flour. Now, what are their criteria? I can't speak to that. I know in some cases, let's call it low to mids and, but they want too much money. Is it a relational issue for some of these brands that are struggling to source flour, or is it just what's available and the other distributors or processors willing to pay a little bit more? Like what's causing this issue?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of passion pricing going on. So what I mean by that is a lot of people put a value on their product as it relates to other metrics. It might be, self-importance because they've been doing this for decades. They feel that they're worth it. It might be, certain debt levels that they're trying to, monetize as why this product should be higher. And then there's the true value of good, better, best and what the market actually understands when it comes to what they're buying in the bag. And, I'm good at it in the sense of like, my legacy roots and to my professional roots, I can tell what good weed is, what medium weed is, what blasé weed is. I can tell you 95% of the time if something's offered to me, it's the wrong price. But I mean, it comes down to a lot of things, right? It starts with a COA, for instance. Like they sent me a COA and it's last year, February, and they're asking $250 because it says 29%. I mean, right off the top, it's last year February. Let's start with that.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
you have 200 kilos left over from last year February, and you think I'm going to pay you an exuberant amount of money because you've got a nice high potency. But why don't you send me a sample and we'll assess it? Right. And if sure enough, it's 6% moisture, it's muted nose, yada, 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 right? So can I even sell it? So then I'll like value prop to a liquor board and say, hey, I've got a 28 gram that I can sell you at this price. And if they like it, I'm going to turn back to that supplier and say, take it or leave it, 95 cents, because that's the only way I'm going to profit off this 28 gram.
Yeah. Wow. Man, it's still so much dependent on a single person or a very small team in a lot of cases, right? Whether that weed's going to move.
Oh, absolutely.
And what if, I mean, this is why it's so crucially important. Like I'm thinking through some of the bad business decisions I've seen some really good companies make. And I think it was literally just a matter of the sourcing, right? Thinking, oh, again, we talk about in the world of retail, do not curate your menus based on your personal preferences. Now, in some cases it works, right? You may have a small
you can have staff
niche
picks and stuff, right?
Yeah, for sure, but not your entire fucking menu, right?
No.
I'm only going to carry all of these because of this, but I see a lot of failures, and someone may look at it, maybe they don't have, it doesn't even matter. They could go back 30, 40 years into legacy potentially, and they've been consuming, they may find that of preference. They love that flour. That's great flour. But en masse, they go, nah, we're not into that flour. Are you finding that in those situations, you talk about someone coming back and they're like, yeah, okay, we've got, it's a year-old product, but we can negotiate the price, but we're starting at $225, which is fucking ludicrous, by the way, if that were the case, as far as I'm concerned. So you almost shop it and then go, okay, at 95, are you seeing these companies willing to negotiate?
Not
that
always.
much?
But I mean, again, if it's a February in this case, for example, come on, man, you've been sourcing, releasing this for 10 months. So do you want money
How far
or
back
not?
will you go? Where's the danger point?
Oh man, I mean, again, you'd be surprised. I mean, my former LP that I worked with, I mean, I took some product that was almost 2 years old. I want to say at least a year and a half. We spent 2 weeks rehydrating it with Bovedas and what have you.
Yeah.
And we put it into 28 gram into a market, and I watched people on Reddit just go ape shit crazy over it and being like, why are more LPs not giving this level of product? All I did was give the bounce back to it, right?
You
which
threw it in the
obviously
dryer on the fluff cycle.
right. And it gave it a little more aroma, what have you, but it was a year and a half old weed.
Wow.
And we spent 2 weeks with massive totes and giant Bovedas to revitalize it.
Jeez.
And I mean, the end of the day, so I mean, I've come to learn that there's a market for everything if you're willing to be honest with yourself about what you have, right? So I mean, if it's a week old and it's 32% by a legitimate lab and your bud structure's fat and massive and it's sticky and it sticks to my hand when I'm like this, that's a different story. And that has a path to premium. But back to a path to premium, I mean, Ontario, the submission was back in November, and whatever they say yes to is coming in May. So if you're just war dialing me and saying, hey, I've got this weed, it's ready, I just finished last week, and we have no plan and we have not talked to each other, I can't buy your weed.
Yeah.
What am I going to, I don't actually have a path to market. I want to help you get to market, but what am I going to do with that? Even though it's a week old and it's beautiful, I don't have a path for that product today. We didn't work together to find you a path.
Yeah. Do you see any of the, your OCSs, et cetera, do you see them shortening that product call time to path to market at all? So that, because I look at that and I get we can produce. So there's a lot of times where the conversation is we can produce X at X percentage. So we can provide you with, so many 28 gram SKUs, this percentage. Hopefully we're going to hit these terps. This is a previous run we did. Here's a COA. but it's not always purpose grown at this point in time, right? It's sitting on older stock. And I don't want to say older stock on purpose. It's just, it's given the distribution challenges, right? So you do a product call, 6 months later, it's in market. I mean, 6 months later, when you talk for that, for that one, right? Do you see that condensing it all over time? Like, are there any plans that you've heard of to try? Like, I know flow through is different.
That market's expanded from 4 a year to 5. I mean, that market has the mindset of, and I mean, I worked with them in alcohol. So like back in alcohol days, you know, they had this attitude of they're the biggest wine buyer in the planet, right? Yeah. So they themselves have their own ego, right? You think growers have an ego. I mean, you know, and so now think about them. They're the biggest wine buyer, the biggest cannabis buyer, legal cannabis buyer in the world.
Yeah. So they can't fit their heads through the door anymore.
Right? So what they say goes. And so they're really trying to push this industry into understanding that there's CPG mindset. Like they built their executive force with like Walmart, 7-Eleven, and you name it backgrounds. And all they know is run-of-the-mill CPG. And so when you think about it from that aspect, it makes sense the way that they're thinking ahead, and you want you to think ahead as a producer and a processor. And when you get on board with their system, it actually does work out really well because, you know when you're landing, and then from your sales and marketing, you understand your tactics. Where like other markets that are more agile, they're more open, which is good for these producers to just war dial and like, hey, I got 30 kilos. What do you want to do? And you throw it in, and next thing you know, you win a SKU. You're also chasing your tail on sales and marketing and communicating to retailers. And so while the product is fresher, you're like way behind on your sales and marketing tactics. And then they're all like, you know, those poor people, they're calling me at 8:00 at night crying because they're like in over their head. You drowned them. They've got 3 weeks to get their shit together. You know, and it's a different animal. So everything has a pro and con. And I mean, those markets that are fast like that, the pro is like, okay, great. It's fresh. Let's get you in. Let's see what the liquor board has to say. But then like, how do I get to the retailers and the sales team and all the point of sale material prepared? And then what that can actually do is that unpreparedness, because you actually only have 10 weeks to prove your threshold. If you're not prepared enough in 10 weeks, you know, the problem with those markets is they've been taught that like every 2 weeks there's something new. And so you get your 15 minutes, you disappear, you were popular for a bit, you get delisted. Your partner's like, yeah, but I'm growing. I have 4 more rooms of that product. Like, well, I don't need it anymore.
Wow. Well, we touched on that a little bit on our last call when we were chatting with David, and realizing that it's turnover. The stores are just going to keep rotating SKUs. And how do you keep up with that when, you know, you're growing? I think I had joked and said, you know, I used to get my loyalist customers that were, what do you got now? I'm like, the same fucking thing I've been growing for 3 years, man. Like, I'm not changing it. You know how much work it took to pheno hunt these? Like, I'm not doing it. But you know, I look at it now as there's so much complexity. I've seen this for a long time, but when you really start to dial in and hone in on it, right? You're like, okay, even if you could control certain factors, the ones that piss you off the most, then you still have the ones that are completely beyond your control, where you've got certain dispensaries that they're going to continue to rotate their SKUs. They are not going to necessarily, they may have a couple standards, right, that they'll consistently stock, but then they just continue to rotate those. How the hell, as a producer, processor, distributor, keep up with that? Like, I just couldn't imagine, because you're like, as you just stated, I've still got rooms full of this. Like, where are we putting it now?
So some learnings from the old days, married to CPG, are in fact intact. Cannabis consumers are similar to craft beer consumers. So, you know, they now trust the market to a certain degree, and they're starting to trust a certain breadth of brands. But let's be honest, you do get used to weed. And so, like, when I used to sell it illicitly, I have, you know, you had your customers that are passionate, they love to tell you what they like and what they hate. And I used to, on purpose, to a couple of people, like, rotate on them. And when I rotate back, they would be like, oh, that batch was way better than the last one. I'm like, dude, it's those pounds have been buried in my storage locker for months. Like, it's the same fucking weed.
Try this one. You'll really like this one. Now this one's got different notes. Yeah. Wow,
But
you're right. That was really good.
Like, if I switch it, he stops complaining, right?
Yeah.
and so there's a version of that truth and reality, right? But also craft beer. When I worked at craft beer, like, they were all the same. So when we built Parallel 49, we really only had 3 core brands, 3 core staples, and we would do 52 beers a year.
Ooh.
Right? And so just limited release. And so, like, when we were like at the peak of our fanfare, people were like, oh, you work at Parallel, and I'd be like, yeah, what's your favorite beer? No one could name that. They knew the company. They couldn't, like, fuck, what beer was I drinking the other day? Right? Because, you know, they just like the constant, like, feeding of that ADD. And as long as we fed, and, you know, if we looked at our beer as hectoliters and just feed that ADD, we get hits and misses. You know, they go on Reddit, oh, the fuck that shit. Well, that's fine, because we're out. We don't do that anymore.
We discontinued that. Thank you for the feedback.
And then what do you do next year? You take all the winners and you add them back to your seasonalities, and then you make some more, right? And then the next year, and after 5 years, you've now got, okay, the market likes these, hates these. Let's reassess our strategy, right? But in the beginning year, the first 2.5, 3 years was just like try, keep trying, right? So cannabis has a version of that, and we're starting to slowly get to a level of maturity, because certain LPs are winning the hearts and mind on staying with certain strains.
Yeah.
But other LPs are struggling to get that staying power. Like, I just want to grow this one strain, market. Please let me grow this strain. But we do have a handful of examples out there, you know, like Woody Nelson, for instance, has a really winning solution with the Rainbow Driver. You know, Caramel is another
Smoker
one.
Farms and their Master Kush Ultra.
Master Kush,
Exactly. But, like, they worked hard for that fanfare, and they continue to work hard to maintain that fanfare while all this other competition keeps trying to, you know, nip at their heels. And so one thing I've come to learn with craft beer drinkers is they eventually like, say, half a dozen craft breweries, and those are their flagship go-to. Like, when they're not in the mood to think, they'll just grab that 6-pack from that brewery that they know. They go to the party. But when they're in the mood to try new things, which is about 50% of their consumption, that's when they flirt with danger and they realize, I got to go back to my flagship. Why did I do that? And so cannabis has a bit of a foot in that door, especially with flower.
Yeah. Dude, that makes so much sense. Even myself, right? Like, there's just so much selection, right? And I know the early days of craft beer, when I was drinking beer, it was, oh wow, this company's got, I love some stuff from Collective Arts, or I loved what Granville was doing, or I love, right? And you'd try these different ones, and then, but I'd be like, why the fuck did I buy that? Why did I do that? Like, I knew that I should have got the other one. I love that stout. Why did I try this? Right. So, and I think that it's a matter of, as those SKU selections continue to grow, it was partially, you know, cat and shiny object. Oh, look, there's something new. I got to try new. But at the same time, there's this dissatisfaction in certain cases, unless you found a winner. But then in a lot of cases, it was, you know, I think of like Lot 420 and some of their rotations, and I'm like, man, out of the gate, they were killing it. And now I don't see a lot from Lot 420. Let me ask you this, because I'd really like to get your advice and leave us with some wisdom. You've been around it a long time, right? So, you know, second gen, legacy, Bevel, you know, moving throughout the trials and tribulations of early days legalization to where you are now with Tricanna. You've worked all the channels. We find that companies, they struggle the most with, you know, let's say they get the product, they get their sales license, they get distribution, they get OCS to say, yes, we'll take your product. They finally get that distribution into, I don't know, we'll call it 100 locations, big or small, whatever. What is their job at that point? How do they ensure that they will continue to resonate with the consumer? Or, you know, we think, because it's such a strange market, right? We got B2B, B2C. It's just fucked. But how do they continue to keep that stronghold where let's say they get a GL, how do they keep it? How do they keep that GL?
Sure. Well, I mean, it comes down to like they do communicate what their thresholds are. Every liquor board has ballpark the same level of thresholds and expectations and timeframes. Like OCS actually used to be 6 months to prove your performance. They've condensed it now to 3 months, right?
Wow.
And and British Columbia is 10 to 12 weeks, and Alberta is 16 weeks. And so if you look at your approach in just pure boxes per week, per month, you take that minimum threshold, that's roughly 80 to 100 cases, depending on how is it 6 or 12 units, whatever. And from a building block stepping stone, like you've got to build that distribution and figure out which of that distribution has staying power and elevate from there. And so if you're brand new, the challenge that we're in right now is because we've got some LPs that are older, so they've now put their flag in the ground and they're worth X, and now the liquor boards love working with them because whatever they bring brings a certain breadth of success. But if you're brand new, just got your license on Friday and you're trying to get your foot in the door, you got a new problem because they've kind of found their friends, but this industry isn't totally mature enough yet to make that statement. And so, you really have to pencil down on who and where and how you can maintain your minimum threshold and sustain that, and then your next threshold and sustain that. Because if you want to build your SKUs, you have to start small, build into it, and continue going. And it's not as easy as it sounds because, all these retailers, they are seduced by different products. They will try new things, absolutely. But they're, the mechanisms, for example, like when OCS has their product drop, it's literally like 2,000 products in one foul swoop. And I mean, there's not even 2,000 stores there. So, and if I'm telling you need to do like 30 cases a week minimum just to stave off delisting, you now need to do 60 cases a week in order to entice the next product call to double down and give you a second SKU.
Wow.
Right. So you really have to take it into that, so as a professional middleman, right, there's a lot of old school to new school. So if you look at what's worked and what hasn't up until this point, very few LPs were successful in being vertical. There's a small breadth of them, but they, had enough money to wherewithal. But ultimately, if you reflect back to the old days, I mean, we had brokers, we had transportation, whatever. You break it all down, and everybody played their role, and they all got a scratch of that margin. You're going to be more successful together, less worried about demanding what you think your margin is, and more working together as a collective to get to that goal together. Because I can promise, as we get into this, if you actually look at the liquor boards, I take the data and I condense it to like how many customers they have, how many brands, all that. The average province has roughly 120, 125 LPs that they're buying from directly. If you go on Health Canada and identify how many have a processing license, it's about 500. So of the 125, like I actually made our data be able to capture the ebbs and flows of that. And so I'll see like in some provinces 125 and 2 months later it's 118. So some processors just vanished. Right. And those are the processors, because that's their customers, right? And the processors might be partnered with more than one brand or more than one, cultivator. But, ultimately most provinces aren't working with more than 125 processors.
Wow.
And so
interesting.
We need to form strength together in order to entice our position with the provinces to be able to build off of our own success. Otherwise, you're just rotating out. So if I get 2 SKUs and I can't maintain the thresholds, my only opportunity is swapping those back out in the next season. Right. So
that makes sense. Wow.
So that's kind of how it has to be done.
You got to use data, man. Use the data.
Yeah, well, data
Yeah.
data comes in many forms.
It does, and not all created equal, but at least it's some starting point. Like we still are just baffled by certain brands and operators, be that LPs or processors, it doesn't matter. That it's like, well, what data and analytics products are you using? Why would we use that? We got our finger on the pulse. I'm like, well, clearly you don't. Then it's not a lick your finger, put it in the air, and find out which way the wind's blowing, right? That's the way some of them still operate, but. Anyways, Aaron, sage advice. I think that you've shared enough for others to probably question what the fuck they're doing in some cases. But also, I think that there's, there is this glimmer of hope though as well, right? Which is, listen, just dial some things in, understand distribution, understand from the sourcing side. And I think it'll work out, but some of them are just, they're stepping over dollars to pick up pennies. And, in those cases, no one wins.
It's going to be tough. And, that's just life in general. But hard work does pay off. Focus does pay off. Good partnerships that are willing to get through tough times. It's just like a marriage, right? It's not all sunshine and roses, but you got to stick it through and figure it out, right?
That's right. You got it.
And at the end of the day, I've never been in an industry with so many passionate people. And, that's infectious because being surrounded by so many happy, passionate, people is unique to us, to be honest with you.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's refreshing. It's funny because you see people that are just frustrated as all hell, but they love their job still.
Right.
And they just absolutely love it. Anyways, Aaron, thanks so much for joining Legacies. We really appreciate you spending the time with us, and we'll certainly have you back on, and we'll stay in contact. And one of these days coming up, we'll start breaking down some data deal bullshit.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
We can do that if you want.
We appreciate it, buddy. We thank you for joining us.
Breadstack e-commerce. It might be time to upgrade.
Well, that was fun, eh, Wes?
Yeah, it's a long one, but it was jam-packed with stuff. A lot of good tidbits in there for other brands willing to listen. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, going back to Jonathan's story and understanding, just seeing the needs is, it gives weight to why we need to keep our eyes wide open, right? There's always an opportunity. There's always a problem to solve, and don't settle, right? In this case, but then, going into our time with Aaron, holy smokes, like the one thing that I love is that we build these relationships with these people. I can just get answers, the straight facts when I need them. No different than when we were talking about, the misconceptions around data deals, what works, what doesn't work. And we were back and forth with David Brown at Stratcan, and he's like, pull Aaron in. And we pull Aaron in, and I'm like, holy shit, we just went to university.
Yeah.
But I mean, someone that's experienced it inside and out, and understanding what it takes to win in BevElk and transferring that knowledge into the cannabis industry, I think is it's invaluable. Like, how do you have to have spent your time in the trenches, which is evident why some of these brands just struggle. I think, they need more Aarons.
Yeah. Keen business acumen from Aaron there. Yeah. There's a lot of,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see if we get any more snow today. There's one thing that we should mention is our friend J-Dub, Jonathan Wilson, previously with Crystal Cure. We're hoping to see the rise of Crystal Cure again. He has uncovered some interesting facts about taxation in this country that is going to rock some policymakers' world, I think. So I think by the time this gets broken out and available, or the episode, he should have some information live. We encourage you to, I think he had mentioned as well, he's dusting off the Crystal Cure account to post on as well. So
beautiful.
Check out his channels.
From the ashes. Phoenix from the ashes.
This is what we love. So check out J-Dub's channels. LinkedIn, you can see him. Instagram, you can see him. Both Crystal Cure and his own personal. I'm sure there's going to be some pretty eye-opening information shared there.
Yeah, if any of the posts that he does are live by the time I post this episode tomorrow, I'll stick the links in the description. So
beautiful. Well, we thank everyone for tuning in. Thanks for joining Legacies.